I was 13 when I first got access to a computer.
My parents bought me a Macintosh in 1984 when I was 8 years old.
I was in 6th grade.
I learned to code in college.
Freshman year, first semester, intro to computer science.
I wrote a program to play tic-tac-toe.
I think it was pretty humble beginnings. I think the first program I wrote asked things like, what's your favorite color? Or how old are you?
I first learned how to make a green circle and a red square appear on the screen.
The first time I actually had something come up and say, hello world, and I made a computer do that. It was just astonishing.
Learning how to program didn't start off as wanting to learn all of computer science or trying to master this discipline or anything like that. It just started off because I wanted to do this one simple thing. I wanted to make something that was fun for myself and my sisters. And I wrote this little program and then basically just add a little bit to it. And then when I needed to learn something new, I looked it up either in a book or on the internet and then added a little bit to it.
It's really not unlike kind of playing an instrument or something, or playing a sport. It starts out being very intimidating, but you kind of get the hang of it over time.
Coding is something that can be learned, and I know it can be intimidating. A lot of things are intimidating, but what isn't?
A lot of the coding that people do is actually fairly simple. It's more about the process of breaking down problems than sort of coming up with complicated algorithms as people traditionally think about it.
You don't have to be a genius to know how to code. You need to be determined.
Addition, subtraction, that's about it.
You should probably know your multiplication tables.
You don't have to be a genius to code. Do you have to be a genius to read?
Even if you want to become a race car driver or play baseball or build a house, all of these things have been turned upside down by software.
What it is computers are everywhere. You want to work in agriculture? Do you want to work in entertainment? Do you want to work in manufacturing? It's just all over.
Here we are, 2013. We all depend on technology to communicate, to bank, information, and none of us know how to read and write code.
When I was in school, I was in this after-school group called the Whiz Kids. And when people found out, they laughed at me and, all these things. And I'm like, man, I don't care. I think it's cool. And, I'm learning a lot. And some of my friends have jobs.
Our policy is literally to hire as many talented engineers as we can find. The whole limit in the system is just that there just aren't enough people who are trained and have these skills today.
To get the very best people, we try to make the office as awesome as possible.
We have a fantastic chef,
Free food,
breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
free laundry,
snacks, even places to play and video games and scooters. There's all these kind of interesting things around the office and places where people can play or relax or go to think or play music or be creative.
Whether you're trying to make a lot of money or whether you just want to change the world, computer programming is an incredibly empowering skill to learn.
I think if someone had told me that software is really about humanity, that it's really about helping people by using computer technology, it would have changed my outlook a lot earlier.
To be able to actually come up with an idea and then see it in your hands and then be able to press a button and have it be in millions of people's hands. I think we're the first generation in the world that's really ever had that kind of experience.
Just to think that, you can start something in your college dorm room and you can have a set of people who haven't built a big company before come together and build something that 1 billion people use as part of their daily lives is just crazy to think about, right? It's humbling and it's amazing.
The programmers of tomorrow are the wizards of the future. You're going to look like you have magic powers compared to everybody else.
I think it's amazing. I think it's the closest thing we have to a superpower.
Great coders are today's rock stars. That's it.
Are you ready to transition from the Canadian Armed Forces to civilian life? Have you started planning what that next step will look like? Let the Transition Workshop hosted by Coding for Veterans help you provide you answers to these questions. We have brought together the best and brightest from the industry who have walked in your shoes. You will gain valuable insight from our speakers as to career options both within the Canadian tech sector and other areas of the economy. Most of all, with our program, we have partnered with veteran organizations from across Canada that can keep you engaged after your release. For more information on our transition workshops or the Coding for Veterans program, visit us at www.codingforveterans.com. We thank you for your service.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Transition Workshop Deployment to Employment for Canadian Armed Forces. We are so excited to have you all here today. We have some amazing panels and some speakers, some special guests, and some specialists that we will be hearing from. And we will also have an interactive session with everyone here. So any questions you have for our specialists, any inquiries you have, we want to make sure we have these tools available to everybody. We want you to gain some knowledge, and we want everyone to take away something from this experience. So we're looking forward to everything that is coming up to the event today. Please note that we are live on YouTube and Facebook for Coding for Veterans. And at any time, if you have any inquiries for our speakers or have any questions for us, please make sure you just give a little comment in the comment section, and we will answer at the end of each segment. So that is just a reminder, and we will be starting very shortly. I'm going to be introducing you all to Jeff Messon, our Executive Director at Coding for Veterans, and he's going to be telling you a little bit more about the event, and then also inviting you to join us with a very special guest today.
Perfect. Thanks, Millie. I'd like to welcome everyone here. For those of you that don't know about Coding for Veterans helps military veterans transition to jobs in Canada's tech sector. With the program itself, there are two streams to it. There is software development and cybersecurity. The courses are delivered 100% online through the University of Ottawa. And with our program, students also write their industry accreditation exams, as well as getting a university education through the University of Ottawa. One thing I always like to say to people is we're not recruiters, right? So we don't take a portion of your paycheck. Employers hire directly from our program, some of which you will hear from today. Another thing to note is we also work with other tech organizations out there, groups like With You With Me and Fortinet, and I see Will Simmons from With You With Me is online, so I want to give him a shout out as well. And we actually have a number of people in their program that have enrolled in ours in order to get those industry certifications as well. So we work well together. Today we have a great program lined up for you, and you'll hear from some military veterans that have walked in your shoes and transitioned into civilian life, and they have some great advice in which to share. As was mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, put them in the chat box, and we'll do our best to get them to the panelists today. And it's great that we have over 200 people who have registered for today's program. So welcome to everyone. And as I say, let's get the show on the road. So it is my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Lawrence MacAulay, Minister of Veterans Affairs, to say a few words. Minister, welcome.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and good to see you again. A lot has happened since we met in Dartmouth, I'll tell you that.
Absolutely.
We've met an odd time on this, but it's not like meeting in person for sure. But again, it's great, and I want to thank the Coding for Veterans for hosting this workshop and Treble Victor for supporting it. First, I want to congratulate the folks who are taking part today. You're about to take your uniform off and step into a next phase of your life. It's a big moment and brings a lot of changes with it. What you do, where you live, how you spend your time, that's all up to you now. I've said many times that folks who served in uniform have skills that any business in the country would be lucky to have. And I've got no doubt that is true for everyone here. But change impacts everyone differently. For some it's easy, for others it is hard. That's why I'm glad to see this workshop, taking the steps to safeguard your well-being and make sure that your life after service is filled with a new kind of purpose. We've got a bunch of experts here to answer your questions and to give you some advice about what comes next. But I want you to know that Veterans Affairs is here for you too. We've got career transition services, benefits for education and training, and programs to help you adjust to this new phase of your life. Through our transition centers, Veterans Affairs and D&D work together to meet the needs of our folks in uniform, our veterans, and their families. So take advantage of the programs, services, and supports that are out there to help you. And always remember that we're here for you the way that you've been here for us. So thank you very much for your years of service to Canada, and truly, I wish you the very best in whatever comes next. Thank you so much.
Minister, thanks for those great words. I can speak for our program, the support that you and your staff and the Veterans Affairs Department have given us. We really appreciate it, and it's made a difference. So I look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully sooner rather than later. And we appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
So next on our agenda, I would like to welcome Colonel Kevin Cameron to give us an update from the transition group in terms of the latest news that him and his team are working on. So Colonel Cameron, welcome.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Pleasure to be here. I assume just give me the thumbs up if you can hear me. Perfect.
Loud and clear. Roger that.
Good. So welcome to, first of all, thank you to Minister MacAulay for the opening remarks, and certainly welcome to everyone who has participating in this today from a speaker or panelist perspective, but equally, if not more important, those who have joined us via Facebook or other means to listen in on this. I think this afternoon has the opportunity to provide some valuable insights and perhaps open some eyes and understanding a little bit on all things transition and veteran support. So what I will do just for a couple of moments here is just provide you the context as it pertains to the Canadian Armed Forces Transition Group, who we are, what we do. Many of you will be familiar with us already, and it's not to get into too much detail other than to provide you an update on the services and structures that are available as one is transitioning, but not limited to that necessarily. There are many supports that can be applied in uniform by the Department of National Defense and primarily Canadian Armed Forces Transition Group, but also dovetail over into the joint initiatives and efforts that we work closely with Veterans Affairs Canada on. And you'll hear about some of those today from other speakers. So just from an overview of the transition group itself, I'm the deputy commander of the transition group. I just as a little bit of background, many of you may already know me. I've been in the transition space for, it seems like only a year or two, but it's been about 8 years now. both inside and outside of uniform, and have landed back here in uniform a few years back to work with the CAFTG to help move the yardsticks along transition supports. And I'm pleased to be here to do that. So the transition group, for those of you who are already out of uniform or still in uniform, you may have been familiar with the Joint Personnel Support Unit. In December of 2018, the transition group stood up and absorbed what you previously would have known as the Joint Personnel Support Unit, which was focused on our ill and injured members, and we continue to be as our number one priority here at the transition group. However, in the defense policy, Strong, Secure, Engage, that came out in 2017 timeframe, the mandate was expanded to create an organization inside the Canadian Armed Forces that supports the efforts of transition for everyone, regardless of release item, regardless of your circumstances or geography. So that is what we're doing here at CAFTG. And to put it into context, approximately 10,000 members take the uniform off every year. That includes regular and reserve members. So as you can appreciate, there is no easy button. There is no single model. Everybody's, and as many of you can appreciate if you've already transitioned, everybody has their own unique circumstances, wants, needs, family dynamics, etc. And so it's not a single solution. There needs to be a full spectrum of opportunity and solutions out there for transitioning members, regardless of what you might want to do next, and where life takes you. So to put it into context for the transition group, and I'll speak just here for a moment on kind of where we are right now in our journey of developing the full slate of services and supports for the transition group, and then I'll bring it for a moment at the last bit of my my talk here, just to put it into the context of organizations like Coding for Veterans and other veteran-friendly or veteran support organizations out there in the landscape that I like to refer to as the ecosystem of support for transition and veterans, and what that kind of means for us as we move forward here, and how it more importantly can help transitioning members and veterans. So first of all, we base everything with around what we term the domains of well-being as far as our modeling. And one of those domains is purpose or life next bound, employment, should that be the choice. And the reality is that the bulk of transitioning members do take up some form of next post-service employment, whatever that might be for them, whether that's opening a business or working for the public service or going into the private sector. So clearly that is a significant domain of well-being in which we are putting emphasis on and working with organizations such as Coding for Veterans and others to help facilitate that where it makes sense for a member or family member to pursue those types of activities. So we do have transition centers that exist on every base in Canada. There's 32 of them total, big and small. We have a fully functioning one in Borden right now. We have just stood up our next fully functioning one in Petawawa. Still a little bit in trial or pilot mode to ensure we get it right before we go full national, to support and expand the transition services for all release items. And concurrent to that, of course, we continue to improve on the supports to our ill and injured members through that same network. Some of the tools we brought to bear, and these can be accessed, the bulk of them can be accessed whether you're in uniform or not. They're not through a protected portal, with the exception of one here I'll speak to in a moment. So we do have an app through the iPhone and Android, the CAF Transition app. So many of you probably have already downloaded it on your phone as a tool to help navigate the experience. We have many of you, if you've already left, or perhaps even if you're still in, have taken a SCAN seminar. So the current SCAN program have been digitized and put online through the Canada.ca platform. And we've developed a very comprehensive transition guide, which didn't really exist before, to elevate the support and understanding around transition beyond what you would know as release. Release is still a thing. Release from the CAF is the administrative side of taking the uniform off. So pensions, doing your final medicals, doing your paperwork, that sort of thing. But transition is much more broad than that. And transition speaks to the entire life experience of transition, what that means for you moving on into your next bound. And not just for you, but for your family or your close friends or your confidants that you may have in your life that help you through this journey. And it's not, I like to, for those of you who like military terminology, which should be most of you, I suspect. I like to say, and I'm an infantry guy by background, so I simplify it this way: transition is not a quick attack; it's a deliberate operation, and therefore it needs planning, it needs understanding, it needs self-awareness across all those domains of well-being that we work closely with Veterans Affairs Canada on as well to develop our programmatics for. So I will say that we are still a work in progress. We were stood up in December 2018, and we continue to improve and develop our more fulsome support mechanisms around transition. And one of these, and this will be the last component that I'll speak to here with regards to the transition group, one of these which is critical to success is utilizing the organizations that exist across Canada that essentially can provide options, whether it be in this particular case, it's Coding for Veterans and others who are represented here on this particular call, but anywhere in the landscape for what one might want to do next, and provide essentially a menu of opportunity. And that's what we are developing through what we are terming the Military Transition Engagement and Partnerships Program, which we're standing up now more formally than we have in the past, working closely with our stakeholders and partners, including Veterans Affairs Canada, to essentially wrap our arms around that ecosystem that is out there to provide a more consolidated and deliberate landscape mechanism for that's easier to navigate. So people can understand where to go to seek support, whatever that support might be required for you. And I just highlight that although employment and health tend to be the two dominating domains of well-being, there are others as well, and there's many organizations in that ecosystem that support, whether it be financial supports or housing and so on and so forth across those domains. So we are here as a formal organization under the Department of National Defense, but not working in isolation inside D&D or CAF. Our mandate exists to expand outward, outside the wire, so to speak, to ensure that we can consolidate and maximize opportunities for success in transition and beyond for you and your families as you navigate. And partnerships or relationships like we have here with Coding for Veterans and other players, albeit not a formality such as a contracted type relationship. It's more of a relationship of goodwill to ensure that we assist in those 10,000 or so members a year that need to navigate or want to navigate into their next mission in life. So I will leave it at that. I know there's a chat going. If there's questions, feel free to send them my way, and I'll pass it back to Jeff.
Absolutely. And Colonel Cameron, thanks for that great update. We have a question here because, some people in the audience are have already started along that transition path, but other ones are kind of contemplating. Can you talk a little bit about if someone is contemplating leaving CAF, when should they start to prepare, and what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, great question, Jeff, and whoever posed that question, thanks for it. We have a history or more of a culture within the Canadian Armed Forces, and that we're so focused on our day-to-day mission, and so we should be, that many times the thought about transition or what you're going to do post-military doesn't really enter the mindset until you're there, until you're at the doorway. And it is our we advocate that it is that's too late. And like everything in life, you should always have a plan B. And that doesn't mean you need to execute it, but it needs to be thought through. And because at a certain point, there's one certainty of military service, and that is sooner or later you will no longer be in the military. And therefore, this should be, and I come back to the quote I used at the front end. Transition is a deliberate operation, not a quick attack. So think it through. The resources are there to do that. As we get better and more thorough in our provision of services at Transition Group, you will see for those serving members a backing up inside service of the education, understanding, awareness, and training even around transition, so that when that inevitability comes, whenever it might be in one's career, whether it's 10 years in or 35 years in, you're not thinking about it as you're walking out the door. You've actually put a plan into motion that you can pull out of the file folder and execute and adjust. And doesn't necessarily need to be the final firm plan. We'll work with you, and Veterans Affairs Canada can work with you, and other stakeholders can work with you to mature or adjust as you need for your circumstances.
Perfect. We actually have another question here. So you talked us through what the transition looks like, but how long does it take from the day a person decides to leave the military until they are officially released on average? And how has that been affected by COVID? Or have you guys been able to help mitigate some of that? And can you give a little commentary around that?
Yeah, maybe I'll kind of answer it in two segments here. I think generally, first of all, there are two release rhythms formally inside the Canadian Armed Forces, and there's most people will be aware of these. There's the 6-month timeline from, and we're talking voluntary release here. I can delve a little bit into the medical side, but that's unique to each individual based on their medical circumstances. But generally, from a policy standpoint, if you are not an immediate annuitant, i.e. if you are not, the moment you step out of uniform, if you're not eligible yet to receive a pension payment, then you're generally on a 6-month timeline. So if you request a voluntary release, there's an expectation that you give 6 months notice. And that 6 months can be, obviously, there's still a job to be done for in that 6-month time, but that time can also be used to solidify the transition plan for yourself and your family. If you are an immediate annuitant, so you're eligible for an immediate pension upon transition, you are entitled to a 30-day release. And as you can appreciate, there's a lot of administration to be done on a 30-day release, and that eats up a lot of that time just doing pure release administration. So although that is certainly an entitlement, and people do leave on a 30-day or give or take parameter, we advocate preparing yourselves well in advance of that 30 days, because trying to sort out your what am I going to do next plan in a 30-day window while you're also trying to do paperwork to exit service, in my opinion, is not wise. And there are resources out there to allow you to scope your next bound way before that. With regards to overall, though, the earlier, as a general statement, the earlier you think about your transition, the better. And again, it comes back to my previous comment. You don't need to execute it yet. But to have that plan, or at least a outline plan of what you would like to do and how you would like to achieve it, the earlier the better. And balancing that, of course, with your life in service, to put priority to your military service, of course, but to have that there in your back pocket, because that time will come someday, and you need to be prepared for it. With regards to COVID specific, we have seen a little bit of a slowdown in transitions, partly, I think, due to some of the uncertainty in the economy and so on. Right now, I don't have hard stats to give on this call, but intuitively, I think we can appreciate that given what is going on with COVID and in the world, people may be holding off on voluntary transition, perhaps waiting it out a little bit to see how things shake out in the economy and job opportunities and so on. Notwithstanding that there are many opportunities still out there, and particularly in the field of which the subject is today. I hope that answers the question, Jeff.
Yeah. No, perfect. We got another one that actually kind of dovetails a little bit. I think it's John here from Petawawa said, can you take us through some of the mistakes that people make when they release? And you covered some of them, not preparing a proper plan, right? Which, leaving it to the last minute. Are there any other kind of nuances that you've kind of seen? I mean, you process thousands of people per year, right? What are some other mistakes that others should, just keep an eye out so the pitfalls that they, can avoid?
Yeah, a great question. The reason we have built the domains of well-being as kind of a model is to help shape one's thinking, and I certainly encourage everybody to, through the app that I mentioned earlier, or through Canada.ca military transition site, dig out the transition guide. Because that really does give you some insights in what you should be thinking about as you are thinking about your, at least even at the very beginning stages of what your transition might look like. And some of the pitfalls, if I could highlight a couple. One is not really understanding what you want to do. And we and there is no one solution. Everybody has a different vision of what they would like to do next. But in many cases, we don't give it much thought while we're serving, and it may even be difficult to nail that down. I guess the advice I would give is that it doesn't need to be perfect the first time. Come up with a plan, and don't be surprised if after you're out for 6 months, a year, or 18 months, perhaps what you thought you wanted to do wasn't necessarily exactly what you would like to do for the next, say, 20 years. And that's okay. That's okay as long as you recognize it and can adjust. And don't be too hard on yourselves, because you're not the only one going through it. Everybody goes through it, regardless of rank, regardless of time in service, regardless of personal circumstances. And one other piece of advice here, and I think it's a very important one, and it may seem like it's a statement that should be obvious, but it's not for many. Involve your family. Transition isn't just about the serving member. Transition is about the family unit. And we do see a lot of pitfalls during the transition period, but probably more afterwards, of members who have made the determination they want to leave the military and transition out, and they haven't involved their family in the considerations in the process. So you will see in everything we're doing, family is a big part of it, to ensure that it's a collective decision and a collective plan, not a plan that only works for half the family. So whatever family means to you, involve them in the experience.
That's some awesome advice. And we've got one more quick question here. Can you give us some direction of who to talk to if your unit isn't tracking the 30-day protected period as part of the op transition? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. And this is not, we actually have seen this question posed to us many times. There is certainly raise it with your chain of command is your first step. So if you feel that either they're not aware of it, or perhaps you don't feel as though it's being abided by, that is a policy that was put out in under the op transition directive, that there is a 30-day protected window of time pre-release date to focus in on transition-related activities. We are working on a DAOD right now that will articulate this in more of a formalized way. So we're in a little bit of a space right now where not everybody has necessarily the exact proper interpretation of what that means. It doesn't mean you're on leave. It doesn't mean you don't have a reporting channel. It doesn't mean you're not subject to the Code of Service Discipline still. It simply means that the chain of command has an obligation to provide you the latitude to protect some time to deal with your transition requirements in those last 30 days. So firstly, engage with your chain of command. If you still feel that that isn't working, then I encourage you, as we develop our capabilities of the transition centers, to engage with the transition center on your local base to have a discussion with them.
Awesome. One last quick question we want to kind of get in here, and I thought this one was interesting. What were the interesting things that you and your team learned during the COVID shutdown that will carry over post-COVID? You know, are scans now going to be online versus so I thought it was a really interesting question how COVID's affected you.
Yeah, it's a great question. We as we look towards full operating capability of the transition group, which we envision to be in a couple of years from now nationally, there was always a plan to have a virtual component, a significant virtual component to everything we're providing. And in some cases, in several cases, we've expedited those efforts. So Scan Online is an example. We've also done some scan, and when I speak of Scan Online, those are the presentations that are embedded in Canada.ca, but we've also taken efforts locally and nationally to do some scan seminar-like activities live. So that's one example. And we've expedited some of the development of our other virtual capabilities, such as Transition Guide version 2 and so on, to put it out there so you don't necessarily need to walk through brick and mortar doors to get the services you need. So I do encourage everybody to on Canada.ca /military transition is the site. Just Google military transition Canada.ca or Government of Canada. You should find it. And certainly through the app, I encourage you to download the app because all the links and connections are there as well.
Awesome. Well, Colonel Cameron, listen, we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. It's been very informative, and thanks for coming and appearing before us today.
My pleasure. It's great to be here, and I wish everybody a great session this afternoon.
Perfect. Thanks. Okay, so next up on our agenda, we have Tara Jones from Agilic, and Coding for Veterans works with Agilic in helping to get placements for our grads and things such as that. So Tara will give us an update in terms of the transition, working with VAC, and kind of the bridge there. So Tara, welcome.
Hi there. Can everybody hear me okay?
Perfect.
Awesome. Great. Thank you very much. I would like to just start by thanking Coding for Veterans and Treble Victor for the opportunity for me to share a little bit about Agilic. For those of you who don't know, we are the national service provider of the Career Transition Services and Veterans Education and Training Benefit Program on behalf of Veterans Affairs Canada. I have a few slides that I'll share with you today just to give you a little bit more information about who we are and what we do and how we do it. So those should show up in a moment. Here we go. Also, before I get going too far, I wanted to thank all of the members, veterans, and family members who may be participating today for your service. And again, for Coding for Veterans for the opportunity. So thank you. So as I mentioned, we're the national service provider of the Career Transition Services Program. We also assist people in their education pursuit, veterans and supplementary reservists who may be eligible for the education and training benefit. And I'll speak a little bit more about that as we talk today. For those of you who don't know Agilic, we were founded in 1985 to deliver vocational assessment, training, and job placement services to persons with disabilities under some provincial contracts within Ontario. We have been delivering the Career Transition Services Program when it launched on April 1st, 2018, and just started year 4 of the program this month. Our program is different than the VAC Rehabilitation Services Program for the ill and injured. So there are differences. We are a different provider and there's different qualification criteria. And I'll speak to that a little bit further today as well. Our organizational mission, I'm just going to flip my slide here one moment. Our organizational mission is to help people in organizations develop their potential. And what I've put up on the slide here today is our 6 core values as an organization. These core values really shape how we do our work with our candidates and all of our different programs across the organization, as well as how we interact with our community partners, our customers, as well as our team members within the organization. Our service delivery approach, we take a shoulder-to-shoulder partnership. Colonel Cameron was talking about, tapping into resources and working together, putting a plan together. That is essentially what we do in the Career Transition Services program. We work with you to develop a plan. We work with you in partnership to support you through the journey. And what that looks like for each person is different depending on your needs, your goals, your timelines, and your comfort in navigating this transition world that you may be experiencing for the first time. The services that we deliver are delivered virtually across Canada from our head office in Oshawa, Ontario. We deliver the services from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. in all Canadian time zones. And while our team is available during 8 to 5 in all time zones, we have a secure web portal that we connect candidates to when they're referred to the program. And that is essentially a tool to gain access to various resources and information to support your transition journey from primarily an employment and an education or training standpoint. We have modules within our secure-based portal for you to peruse at your leisure and view as often as you like to get some self-taught guidance on your transition. And then our coaches are working closely with you to support you in that journey on a one-to-one basis. Due to the nature of the program being virtual, 100% for everyone, we also have a team of administrators and technical support specialists to assist our team as well as our candidates to navigate the program from a technical perspective. All right. Just to touch on a few components to the program, candidates may do one of these things, all of these things. It's really flexible. It's really individualized for each person. We start with an intake assessment, which is essentially a discussion and a quick Q&A to get to know you, to understand kind of what you're looking for from the program. We have a planning journey that we will work on together to understand, where you are today, where you want to go, what's your timeline to get there, and then work together to develop an action plan to execute as a partnership. We also support labor market information gathering. As I mentioned, our 12 courses within our secure portal are both in French and English. We have one-on-one career counseling, referrals to other programs and services. There was some questions posed in the last segment around different partnerships through your transition journey. So a component of our program is to help you find those other programs and services, perhaps in your community, that may help you with your transition that's different from what the Career Transition Services program provides. As well, job finding assistance. We have a team of folks on our team for job development services who are actively working with organizations like Coding for Veterans, as Jeff mentioned, as well as employers across the country to connect candidates who are ready for employment to employment opportunities. And, essentially transition support to get you to that next stage of your life, whatever that may be. So ensuring that you have a smooth transition into new employment or education as you need it. Again, just a couple of components of the many that we can support you on. I won't go through the entire list, but again, it's customized to each individual's goals, preferences, timelines, and their comfort level in doing this journey independently or with support. It's a voluntary program, so you can come, get familiar with the program, and then leave the program and come back when you're ready. So from an active member perspective, you're able to access the program, get connected to the secure portal, connect with a coach, and start to peruse things at your leisure. And then perhaps as you're closer to your release date, you may re-engage in the services by just contacting us directly back through the secure portal or by phone, and we can pick up where we left off. So very flexible in terms of coming in and out of the program. As well, we've seen people who have been coming to pursue education, perhaps funded by the education and training benefit, so helping them set a plan of pursuit towards education. And as their education is winding down, they return to the program to start a new plan to conquer their employment journey. This is just a quick snapshot of our secure portal. The landing page for our portal is a public site. So I just want to point out, I'm not sure if you can see my pointer, but just above our Agilic logo at the bottom right corner, there is a chat bubble. When you land on our secure web-based portal, which I will put up the address at the end of this quick presentation, you can chat with our support team and our IT team and our coach team, again, 8 to 5 in all time zones across Canada in both French and English. So if you have questions, if you're not yet a candidate and you have questions, you're welcome to reach out to us. We are also partnering with many organizations as of April 2020 to offer employer information sessions. Once the information session happens, we record those sessions and also put them up for access to all of our candidates through the web-based portal as well. So a lot of different features within our portal. We have also had candidates who were deployed internationally and they are transitioning, in 6 months' time, perhaps, due to the virtual nature of the program and the secure web-based portal. They were able to participate in the program, start to get things organized well, serving internationally, and then join us a little bit differently once they're back on Canadian ground and perhaps different access to technology. So very flexible. So how to get connected to us? From the Career Transition Services perspective, it is an application process that you must submit to Veterans Affairs Canada. You can do that through your MyVac account or by mail, and it's the VAC 1533 form. Once you're determined to be qualified for the program, our organization receives a referral of your contact information within our system, and we call you within 1 to 3 business days. From the education and training benefit perspective, if you might be seeking to determine if you qualify for some funding, perhaps to take a course like Coding for Veterans, there's a 2-step process. And you apply to first determine if you qualify for the education and training benefit. And then the next step, which you can do at the same time or separately, is to complete either a formal program plan or a short course plan. And one of the components of how we support candidates is to help them understand which plan form might be the best approach based on the organization that they're going to take their training or their education, what that training and education is, and the duration of that education and training. For anyone who applies for the education and training benefit who is not yet a veteran or a supplementary reservist, your applications will be held in a queue until you become a veteran or a supplementary reservist, and then Veterans Affairs Canada will assess your application for qualification. So to qualify for the education and training benefit, there is some great information on the VAC site in the Q&As for both the Career Transition Services program and the education and training benefit. So I definitely recommend you go and check those out if you're curious, but at a very high level, you must be honorably released from the Canadian Armed Forces on or after April 1st, 2006, or are a member of the Supplementary Reserve and have at least 6 years, which translates to 2,191 paid days, and you may qualify for up to $40,000. 12 years of service, 4,382 paid days, you may qualify for up to $80,000. It's very important to note that as a veteran, you are not able to access the education and training benefit if you are also participating in the rehabilitation services program. You can participate in the CTS program before or after the rehab program, but not at the same time. Or the Canadian Forces Income Support Benefit. Again, not at the same time, but you can before or after. And also important to note that VAC receives the number of paid days of service from the D&D Pension Center, if you're curious. All right, just another slide or two and we'll be wrapping up here, but access to the education and training benefit funds. So once you qualify, as I mentioned, there's two ways to access funding. There are formal program plans and there are also short courses. So a formal program plan is a longer duration program. It's from an approved post-secondary institution, and it results in a degree, a diploma, a certificate, or training leading to a certification or a designation. Short courses, you can spend up to $5,000 of your $40,000 or your $80,000, which can go towards courses such as a small business, boot camp or entrepreneurial boot camp. Maybe it's a component of a longer program, but you're just doing one component at that point in time. And so that's where the short course may be the right fit. So also important to note that all education and training benefit funding is taxable. For more information about the Career Transition Services Program or the Education and Training Benefit, as I mentioned, there are some really great, easy to navigate Q&As on the Veterans Affairs site, or you can contact Veterans Affairs directly at the number on the screen, or you can contact our team at the number on the screen. The address there is the address for our secure web-based portal. That's where you can also get our contact information or find us through the chat bubble between the hours of 8 and 5 in your time zone. Thank you.
Cool. So Tara, thanks for that very valuable information. We've got time here for a couple of questions that people have chimed in. So the first one was from Chris here. I think you may have answered this, but in relation, in terms of qualifying for your program, he's, working through his ILP, still up and running. Is your program available to those still in the military but don't have access to post-release education funding, or what happens in that situation, or do they have to wait till after?
Yeah, great question. It may be available, so your best bet would be to apply to the Career Transition Services Program to get connected to a coach. We can deliver the services to active members. We can deliver the services to reservists. We also deliver the services to spouse and common law partners, survivors, and of course, veterans. We do support many candidates who are on an ILP as well. So we can connect with you, assuming you qualify through Veterans Affairs.
Awesome, cool. And we got time for one more question here. Ashley was asking, are Agilic coaches trained to discuss transferable skills from military to civilian terminology? And what does, can you talk a little bit about the coaches and how they, kind of help the veterans along things like that in terms of translating their military service to civilianese, we'll call it?
Yeah, for sure. So yes, we are all trained. We continue to focus on growing our skills and our knowledge all the time as well. Many of our coaches have been in the transition support world in a various employment and training programs for many, many years, some upwards of 20 years with the Agilic organization in various provincial and federally funded programs. We have training on transferable skills analysis. We also have some modules and activities within our courses on the Secure Portal to help the candidates start the process, but also our coach team to support that process and that journey. In our Secure Portal as well, we also utilize a tool called Career Cruising. That's also has assessments and different types of tools to help people navigate kind of, their military skills and experience, and we support that journey in translating them into civilian terminology.
Awesome. So listen, Tara, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to be part of this workshop. And, we, from Coding for Veterans, thank you and your team with the support you've given us over the years too. So
yeah, thanks again for the opportunity. And I look forward to the rest of the session today. So take care, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks. Okay, so up next is a panel that's going to talk, give those in the audience insights in terms of what transitioning veterans from CAF have encountered before you. So there's nothing better than using experience as the teacher. And we've got a great panel we have lined up, and Dave Mack is going to moderate it. And Dave is one of the most unique individuals that I've met. He was one of the first people when we launched Coding for Veterans to really embrace it, and he's been one of the key advisors on our program. So Dave, welcome, and looking forward to the panel you have discussion lined up today.
Great, thanks, Jeff. And this is going to be a great panel. We have about 30 minutes to walk through some of the lessons learned by veterans who have gone through transition and are now employed. So with me, I have Mark, Kira, and Marceli. And it's great to have you three here today. And let's just get started. Let's just jump right on in. And I've got a couple of questions for each one of you. And I'll let you choose, who wants to go first. First question, really, really simple. Introductions. Who are you? What was your role? What was your rank in the military? And what do you do today? Who wants to go first?
Looks like Kira does.
Okay, then I'll jump in. So I left as a lieutenant AXO, but I spent most of my time as a naval warfare officer before that. And now I'm a full-time student, actually. I'm doing a research master's through Queen's, but also I'm doing a cybersecurity program through University of Ottawa, facilitated by Coding for Veterans.
Fantastic. Mark, how about yourself?
Hey, everybody. My name is Mark Kotzer. I was 20 years in the Air Force as an area officer and hung out with Sea Kings for the majority of my time. Left as a major. And I've been now in industry for about 8 years. I've worked at IMP Aerospace and Defense, serving shipbuilding, and I'm currently at MDA, which I hadn't heard of before, but it's the company that's building satellites in Canadarm2 and 3 and all that kind of stuff. So that's me.
Thank you. Marceli?
Hey, so I was a naval warfare officer, served, on a variety of different ships, deployed multiple times, worked as the aide to the commander of the Royal Canadian Navy for a stint, and then worked in Washington. I actually got out about a year ago, and at first I thought I wanted to pivot into software development, so that's where I went. Also took an adjunct role with RAND Corporation, a think tank in Washington, D.C., in their cyber and intelligence policy division before transitioning to where I am now, which is a pathways operation manager for Amazon at one of the largest fulfillment centers in the southwest of the United States.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Whereabouts in this? Like Austin or something like that?
I'm in beautiful Phoenix. It's 100 degrees, so 32 for Canadians. And basically everything that gets shipped out of the Southwest, a good chance it comes from my facility. So
fantastic. Well, enjoy. So next question. So let's think about preparation. So we're giving advice now to veterans and people who are about to leave the military. What sort of guidance or advice would you give them on things like networking and job hunting, resume preparation, and what would you be highlighting in your resume? What have you learned so far? What kind of career guidance and how do you figure out your career? And lastly, what kind of qualifications and courses would you recommend taking or do you know that are really quite useful to make the leap? And again, who wants to jump on that question first?
Dave, that's such a loaded question.
Yeah. I'll let you guys.
Just unpack it all.
I know. So how about you start then?
Yeah, sure. I'll certainly start. I think one of the reasons I agreed to stand on this panel is I think that we do kind of a poor job perpetuating the right narratives for veterans that are considering transition. So I won't lie, I actually was pretty lost in the time after I transitioned. Suddenly I was left having to reconcile my personal and professional identities, and without the military, I was really left to sort of figure out what I really wanted to do when I grew up, but I was already grown up. And I think we look at transition in a kind of a strange way, rather than a journey, which I think is truly the nature of the transition experience, we tend to like to put it in two classifications: is either you've had a successful transition or you've failed at your transition. So I guess what I would start out by saying is the best place to start is from a place of uncertainty, and then to work from there, and understanding that that is a completely natural feeling, that it is completely overwhelming to suddenly be left with infinite amounts of choices and not necessarily understanding what's out there in terms of opportunities, and then not understanding where your skill sets fit in. So I think the biggest lesson that I learned was to say yes more than I said no, and how that how I leveraged that in my everyday was, I knew that I wanted to transition into a tech role, but I didn't have a tech background. So before, starting a program like Coding for Veterans, I took a role as a quality assurance specialist for a software development company. It was a role that, I was making maybe $40K a year. It was basically very entry level. And my hopes by taking that position were just to better understand the business, to understand what opportunities were out there, if it would be a good fit. And frankly, I had to eat some humble pie. And, coming out of it, I realized that all the skills that I had as a veteran really came to bear when I was looking at taking on bigger projects, when I was looking at managing teams. And so while initially, anyway, I didn't understand how I could leverage those skills, it became very apparent to me, as I was in it. So I guess I would just say, if there are opportunities that you want to learn more about or you think would be a good fit, you have to have, I guess, the courage to step out of your comfort zone and try them, even if it means taking a step back, because you do have to earn that credibility, right? So very often it will mean, taking a role that maybe isn't necessarily what you envisioned for your transition experience, but is going to help propel you forward and figure out what it is that you do want to do.
Fantastic. Mark, how about yourself? Can you speak at all to just the networking and resume writing and things to highlight in your resume?
Sure. I had an interesting experience. I went through military college, and kind of from day one all the way up to almost when I retired, you kind of get used to hearing a lot about, how special we are in the armed forces and how, how elite everything is. And it really can start to stoke an ego. And if I had one piece of advice for everyone, it would be to really do everything you could to battle the ego. Humility, is so important. When I retired, I was a professional engineer with an MBA and led hundreds of people. And so how I expected things to go was I could post my resume to whatever it was at the time, Monster or Workopolis or whatever. And then I would sit back and comfortably watch the bidding war begin. And that did not happen. And it didn't happen because, similar to what we just heard, my expectation was that I could laterally transfer into industry. And if you think about it the other way around, if there's some people who had a 20, 25 year career out of the military and industry and decided for whatever reason to join the Canadian Armed Forces, they wouldn't be joining as a major or as a colonel. They have to start at the beginning. And that's something that I would like everyone really to appreciate. Regarding resume writing, something that I found helpful is to get as many eyes on your CV as you can, ideally with family or friends or trusted colleagues who are not in the military, and they can help shape the content. All of the people I've ever worked with since then, I've come across an acronym, and I still use it today, which is the CAR acronym, the Challenge, Action, Result. And I see a lot of resumes, and when you compare a resume that basically looks like a job description where someone tells you what they were responsible for and the things that they had to do, it really pales in comparison to a CV where someone expresses something difficult that happened, some sort of concrete action they took, and then expressed an outcome, ideally in a quantifiable way. It makes it much more impactful and much more compelling. With networking, something that I found useful was to use LinkedIn as a way to, instead of having cold calls, to have warm calls with individuals. I connected with as many people as I could, really regardless of how appropriate it might have been, because I also was somewhat uncertain as to where I would end up. And then I would introduce myself to leadership of those organizations who connected with me, and just offered to take them out for a coffee so I could learn more about their company and the type of work they did. And I would ask for some advice to help me transition. I wouldn't try to be a hard sell saying, I want to work for your firm. But what usually happened was I'd be denied the offer to take someone out for coffee, and instead presented an offer to be taken out for lunch. So I got tons of free lunches. I got to meet a bunch of people, and that ultimately is, at one of those lunches, I had what I didn't know at the time was an interview, and that led to my first role at IMP Aerospace and Defense. And finally, it is really about connecting. So I'm not sure who's on the other side of this call. I can't tell, but now that you have my name, you can find me on LinkedIn, and it is something that I love doing, helping people connect to others in industry. So I happen to be in the middle of a high-tech software firm, and it sounds like there's a few of you who I might be able to support in some way. So do not hesitate to contact me at any time following this event.
Awesome, thank you. And Kira, the same question to you when you're thinking about, you're taking a course right now. What's going on in your mind, right? What are you thinking about, and what are you looking, as you progress? How are you continuing to prepare yourself to take action and to secure a job?
Right. So I think a lot of things were touched on there and are important. A major one for if you're still in the planning phase of your transition, and maybe you don't know what exactly you want to do when you grow up, like it was mentioned, and maybe you're going to use the ETB and go back to school. It's important to consider what the industry is like right now and what it might be like when you're done your training as well. Like obviously the world's a little bit different now than it was a year ago when I released, and it will probably be different in a year as well. So if you're going to spend all this time and maybe money retraining yourself in a new industry, make sure that the jobs are there. That's something that I think I've seen a few people make a mistake. They have this dream job in their head, but the need is not there right now. So it's important to plan in that sense as well. What I did for resume preparation, I had a really hard time with the translation between military and civilian speak. It depends. Like if you have a trade that has a direct civilian transition or translation, it might be more straightforward. But if you're, say, a naval warfare officer or infantry or artillery, that might be a challenge. And so I ended up using a resume service, which I would recommend, especially the ones who are used to working with military, because they already have that experience doing those translations. So instead of you driving yourself crazy, you can have a good conversation with a professional who has experience doing it. And that's what I did, and I would recommend that for sure.
Thank you. Next series of questions are on really expectation management. And so we touched on this a little bit. We talked about humility and ego and all the rest of it. And one of the sort of sub-questions I have is, can a captain of infantry become a captain of industry overnight? And really, you guys have already indicated that's pretty much balderdash. But just kind of building on that, what can I expect? So when I suddenly land, in the role, what is life like? Is the business world like the military? Are there common experiences? Are there common overlaps, or is it a completely different world? It's like, so walk me through that. And also, if you can, what are one or two common hurdles that military veterans encounter once they've made the transition into industry? Who wants to hit that one first? I think, Mark, you're on first because the other one's gone first before.
All right, sounds good. So it's interesting. My experience in different companies and even in the one I'm now is there's a bit of a bias that joining veterans might rely too heavily on the authority vested in their formal role to influence the organization, which is really the lowest level of leadership. So that's not how I was trained in the Air Force. I was trained to be a servant leader, and I still use that approach today. So the expectations that I have of new people and that were had of me was again, we talked about humility, but to be in a learning mode. And as a leader, when I mean servant leader, and it's what I do even today, it's not my job to understand the nuances of what everyone in my organization is doing. Like, I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, so I'm working with software developers and systems engineers. I don't pretend to know what they're doing, but always taking the approach to make sure that they have the right tools for their work, the right structure, everything that they need. It's my job to provide for them. So the way I've always looked at an organization is that it's an inverted pyramid where everybody works, for the folks, if you will, in the trenches. And I think that applies as much in the infantry as it does in industry. And if that's the kind of leader you are, I think that can go a long ways, and it can be applicable in a variety of domains, especially if you're not familiar with the details of the work that's going on.
Cool. Thank you. Kira, how about yourself? How do you want to answer that question?
Sorry, I cut out for part of that. Could you repeat the question? I'm so sorry. Something happened to my volume.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Just in terms of the expectation management, what does it look like once you're in industry? What does it look like? What is that experience like, and what sort of hurdles do veterans experience once they transition into industry?
Right. So I don't want to repeat too much of what was said, but it's absolutely true. You're looking at an entry level position when you leave, because you're starting from square one in that industry, most likely. So you have to accept that you have to work your way up from the bottom, just like everyone else. And a little bit too of the, maybe you're not super special, and yes, you have these amazing soft skills, and that's 100% true. You have leadership experience and oral written communication experience, which is really important, but you need that you need the experience that's directly applicable to that job, which you're most likely not going to have and going to have to start at square one doing. So keep that in mind when you're looking at applying for jobs. You're not going to jump up to senior management just because you might have been considered a senior leader where you are coming from. So I think that would be the big thing to keep in mind for sure.
I always find it's a challenge to do the transition, but it's also very exciting because you are learning something new for the first time. You're jumping into something, and you're making the decision to actually say, okay, I'm done with the military now, and I'm going to jump over into this. And I put myself in a situation, and all you can do is dig, right? That's the option. So Marcelia, over to you. Same question about expectation management.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I had two vastly different transition experiences. So the first transition experience was into obviously a software consultancy, which couldn't have been further from my military experience. We were mostly a lateral organization, very flat. We were encouraged to kind of pitch ideas, take initiative. We didn't really have an approval process. That self-licking ice cream cone of bureaucracy was gone. You had to tell devs to shower before they showed up to Zoom meeting. Like, it just was a very different environment. By contrast, going to Amazon, there were a lot of parallels for me, just in the way that it's structured. Some of the kind of leadership principles that we have are very similar to the ones that we have in the CAF. So when I moved over to Amazon, I actually felt very much at home, which was something that I was not expecting. But I would say, being one of a few veterans that work out of our Phoenix 6 location, the one thing I would caution veterans that are moving into roles that are almost not paramilitary, but into an organizational structure that is similar, is just to fight the urge to fall back on what feels comfortable. I have a colleague who spent 25 years in the Air Force as an NCO, came out. He's a very capable and accomplished leader. But I would say that his development as a leader at Amazon has actually stalled a little bit because he's been falling back on his old leadership styles, to the detriment of taking those new learning opportunities, looking at what Amazon has to offer in terms of leadership development and mentorship opportunities, and then trying to leverage that and develop his own skills. So I guess what I would say is definitely lean heavily on the skills that you've learned, but at the same time, you just got to go in with an open mind, an open heart, and understand that, you know, just because you've done it this way for so long doesn't mean that there aren't better ways to do it. And as you get more exposure, it'll only help you, you know, as you progress through your career journey.
All right, so I want everybody to think now back to the day that the days in leading up to leaving the military. You know, what is that word of advice you give yourself right now? So if you're sitting there and you know you're leaving and you've signed off and you're on the cusp, and that moment your heart's beating a little bit because it's pretty ambiguous, what advice would you give yourself right now? Who wants that one first? You guys are all in contemplation. It's great.
Yeah.
You broke first, Mark.
I didn't appreciate how much work that it would be. Not anywhere close. Like I said earlier, I really did believe I could write down the stuff I did on a piece of paper, put it on a website, and then I could pick, you know, from all of the offers. And I didn't appreciate that that networking is a real thing, and the relationships that you make really matter. And so I would have told myself, you can start that process much earlier than I did. I really kind of got into my transition efforts maybe with about 3 months of runway left, and I was fortunate enough to be able to find a role that worked for me. But that was as much really honestly luck as anything else. It just, you know, if there's a right vacancy at the right time, I was able to pick it up. So I think it's never too early to start. Everyone in industry is doing it anyway, so why not all of you? Why not to get going on this right away and have that network there and be comfortable with using it and exercising it when the time comes?
Who wants to go next? Who wants to answer that question next? That little bit of advice you want to give yourself. All right, Kara, you're on.
Okay. For me, I would definitely say plan farther ahead than you think you need to, as was sort of touched on there. And in regards to the networking, just like pull at whatever you can. And for me, I wasn't necessarily looking for a job in industry when I left. I knew I was going back to grad school. So for me, I was looking for a supervisor who could take me on as a graduate student and was in my field. And the first thing I did was contact a old professor from when I was in university, and just that email and that conversation, all I did was ask for advice. He, like I was in the military, I need to get back into a field which I haven't been in for 6 years. And that conversation led directly to my supervisor and where I am today. So even the smallest things, like the littlest windows that you can pry open, can really turn into a job or whatever you're looking for in the end.
Marceli, over to you. What's your last bit of advice you'd give yourself?
Yeah, no, I was actually terrified before I got out, and I thought that I had done a good job preparing for my transition. So I guess I would just say, you know, you're gonna feel completely lost and confused, and I don't think there's any amount of preparation you can do to not feel that way. But, you know, the more comfortable you get talking with people, leveraging those opportunities, you know, like Mark put out there earlier, I too offer my services both as a counsel. You know, if you need someone to look over your resume, if you're curious about Amazon, feel free to reach out. And so there will be tons of people like that in your life who kind of, you know, put out there that they're willing to help, and just taking advantage of those people. You know, while being very understanding and cognizant of their time and the fact that they are doing you a favor. But, you know, in the end, I think it's really important just to remember that there's no amount of preparation that will make you feel prepared enough to leave. There's only practice and getting used to speaking about your narrative. And as you gain experience talking with others, using them as sounding boards, you will come to a better understanding of what it is that you offer as a leader and what you offer to these industries. So I would just say, as many people as are willing to talk to you about your next steps or about what opportunities there are in the industry, like take them up on that and use that opportunity to really like hone that narrative for yourself so that you can speak fully to your capabilities, to your goals and what you have to offer, because you have a lot to offer.
And I think, you know, some things you've said already about saying yes, and always looking for opportunities to connect with people and just putting yourself out there constantly. I think those are really important sort of messages. You know, there's questions from the audience, and I'm really interested in the comparison between the Canadian and the US experience. And that is, how does industry interpret military career or military experience? How does industry interpret that, and how does it embrace it? Or not? So how is it in the US? What is that like? What is that experience like in the US when you have a military line on your name?
No, certainly. It's vastly different. I won't lie. The safety net here for veterans is significantly bigger. I don't think we have that same necessarily outward pride of service that Americans do. It's just part and parcel of their national identity. National defense is so much a part of their cultural narrative. So that being said, I always found that when I walked into a room, very often I was meeting another veteran. So I would say of the 5 interviews that I went on, at least 4 were with former service members. Certainly the Pathways operations manager role that I fill is typically one that accepts many military. So, you know, I had a really wonderful experience. I would say there are people who understand, but similarly, there are people who don't understand necessarily the military background. And, you know, there are certain stereotypes, I think, that come along with military members who transition, you know, an unwillingness to change and see new perspectives, maybe a reliance on old ways of doing business, a reluctance to adopt new technologies, to think outside the box. So you do have to go in realizing that while you may meet people who understand where you're coming from and are willing to, I guess, act as a sounding board, that you should also look out for diverse perspectives, people who don't necessarily know what the military is or what we have to offer, and just, you know, talk to them about what they expect of somebody coming with a military background, and then position yourself in a way that you can kind of attack those stigmas head on.
And Mark, how about yourself? What's been the experience like in the Canadian sectors?
I think it really depends. I've been in the defense sector since I've left. So my first role at IMP Aerospace and Defense it's more like a halfway house than actually industry, because you're working almost exclusively with veterans at every level of the organization. And so you know, moving to Irving Shipbuilding was a bit different, a bit less, and finally here there's less of it. Certain roles, it's just an obvious translation. There's people on our team right now who are teaching submariners how to drive submarines. So, I mean, it's obviously that experience, if that's what you used to do, is directly applicable, and it makes you unique and an easy hire for us. Others, you know, it can be a little bit more challenging to express and relate the type of activities that you've done depending on the role. I tended towards project management, because when I reflected back in my career, it seemed like that's more or less what I had been doing. There were, you know, tasks with beginnings and ends that were unique. That's kind of what project management is. And so that type of experience was the easiest for me to translate to a demand in industry. But I think it really does depend what market sector you're looking for and what company you're looking for.
One final question, and then we'll hand it back over to Jeff, and that is simply on the family. You know, what is the family involvement? What does that look like? What kind of pressure does it put on the family to go into transition, and how do they support you? And what is that experience like from their perspective?
I'll jump in. Just I have three children, 3 teenagers at this point right now, and when I left the Air Force, they weren't, and it has been nothing but fantastic, because I don't have to move. You're going to have your pension potentially on top of a new income, and I was able to have that stability. We're a single income and have always been a single income household, which is a bit rare. So there was obviously the stresses involved in ensuring that we'd be able to pay the rent, and that's probably something I wore a little bit more. But it really was a net positive. I was looking for stability, and I found that. And your career is in your own hands.
Okay. Who else wants to answer that question in terms of family? All right. So I'm going to actually ask one final question for each one of you. This is your last chance. We've talked about a lot of different topics. We've touched on how you prepare yourself and how do you think about resumes and lots of good stuff. Mark, really your comment too about having data points, about having actual outcomes in your resume, and that sort of CAR approach is really, really valuable. But so we've touched on a lot of different things here. What are your final thoughts? Your last words that you want to provide to the military, to people that are in transition? What is it? What message have you not got a chance to kind of communicate yet that you would like to be able to express?
I'll start off. I like humor, so I'll leave you with a little humor. The most stressful part of my transition in the first 2 weeks was I would drive into the parking lot at IMP, and as I was about to leave my car, I was hit with this shock of anxiety and terror, this oh my God. And it was basically because I would look to my right on the passenger seat where I always kept my hat, and there was no hat there. And that I had no idea how much that became part of who I was, and how absolutely unacceptable it would be like to be outside without a hat. And so it took me some time to get through that. But in a more serious note, I think that you all have tons to offer industry, and to be confident in yourself, but to be humble at the same time, and just be open to learning new ways of doing things.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Marcelia, what are your last thoughts, words of wisdom and guidance you'd like to provide?
I love Mark's comment about the hat, because I also had that experience several times. But I guess the last bit, I'll go with humor too, but it rings true. If your resume is longer than 2 pages, it's too long. Realistically, for most junior officers, folks that have been in for less than 10 years, 1 page is probably good. And I would encourage everybody, get as many eyes on as possible, stick to results-driven outcomes, and just really fine-tune that bad boy. No one wants to read a novel.
Awesome. And Kira?
Yeah, so sorry, my work from home, my cat's sitting in front of my camera. So what I would say is it's a process. You're probably not going to turn in your uniform on Friday and then go to your dream job on Monday. So it's all about just like small steps and planning ahead and working towards whatever your overarching goal is. And in whatever incremental ways that you can, like keep your certs up to date. And if you're still in the military, like keep your first aid. That's really helpful in certain industries. Take online courses as you can, and just keep the goal in mind at all times. Because even though it feels like transition is going to happen overnight, and one day you're in the military, one day you're not, it really is. It's a process, and you have to stick with it.
I agree, and just from my own experience, I've gone through a couple of iterations in my own career, and it's interesting to see how at times I can rely on some of the experiences I've had in the past and the leadership skills that I've developed through the military, and some of even the way in thinking about how to solve a problem. But at other times I've had to throw it all in the bin and restart altogether. And it's and that these comments that you've made about humility and really starting at that entry point and recognizing that, I used to have an expression, something along the lines of, when I was in the military, they called me sir or captain, and now they call me David. And I was working at a bank, and I would dress up in the military on a Friday. We'd wear our Friday wear, and the bank, we wore jeans. And I used to live in an 18th century fort up in the north of Scotland. And all of a sudden, I was going to work in a in a glass and steel building. And finally, I used to go to work in the back of a helicopter. And all of a sudden, I was taking a streetcar. And I think it's all those sort of different narratives and different lines, some of which you've touched on, that recognizing that the world's changed. You've made the decision. It's not going to be straightforward right away. It's going to take some time to get there, but eventually you do kind of realize that as you look back, you're now more civilian than you are military. But the military is always going to be with you. It's always going to be part of informing your experiences and informing how you understand things. So it doesn't mean it's daunting by any means, but it's definitely something that is very realistic. But fortunately, as Marcelo and Mark, everybody, you've all mentioned, you have friends and family that are there that are ready to jump in and to help you out. There are people that are out there in your network that can help you, whether that is trying to find a job, helping you with your CV, cleaning it up, and helping to interpret it. And there are services, like Kiera said, that will allow people to do some of that translation. That will then, and there are headhunters available too that will help you land roles that fit your skills, that will allow you to move things forward. So I thank you very much, all three of you, for joining us today. And I think I'll hand this over. Is it to Jeff? Is Jeff taking the lead from this point on?
Hi, Mark. It's actually Millie here. Thank you so much, Mark, Mars, Dave, and Kiera for joining us. Our viewers are all commenting how your opinions and your stories are actually very helpful, and they've gained so much insight, which is what this workshop is all about. We're trying to bring everyone together from all fields, and hopefully everyone is getting a little bit of knowledge from and helping each other out. So thank you so much for joining us today. And on that note, we actually will be taking a very short break for 5 minutes just to give everybody a little moment to stretch your legs. So a 5 minutes break. And upcoming, we have Robert Zanfer. He is from Nesbitt Burns, and he is going to be advising everybody on investing. And the segment is called How Do I Set Up My Financial Nest Egg? It is going to be some jewels of information. So tune in 5 minutes. We'll be right back after these short messages.
Your mission is to find a meaningful career after your service. At Veterans Affairs Canada, our mission is to support you. The education and training benefit is part of that support. All veterans who have honorably released since 2006 and who served at least 6 years can apply for this benefit. The amount of money you receive will be based on your years of service. We have made this benefit flexible so you can choose what's best for you, the education that'll help you get the career you want, the school that best suits you. And after tuition is paid, you can choose how to spend any remaining money to best support your education that semester. Not sure what career or education path to follow? We can help. A career counselor with the new Career Transition Services program can help you develop a plan. We know a meaningful career is an important part of your well-being. This benefit can help you achieve both. To learn more about the education and training benefit and how it may help you, go to veterans.gc.ca. A message from the Government of Canada.
I wanted to work for Veterans Affairs Canada because of the specific clientele that Veterans Affairs have. I've met a lot of veterans and retired RCMPs with such health debilitating concerns. So then I wanted to do more for them. I wanted to become more of an advocate. And I think it's very important that we remain closely linked to these clients because they deserve to have this type of support. Really, it's going back to the basics of nursing and knowing the fundamental nursing principles, which are, knowing your ethics, the responsibility, fidelity, autonomy, integrity, doing good and to do no harm to your clients. If you keep to the basic, you'll make Florence Nightingale proud. You'll be like the more modern nurse, I should say. But there's quite a bit of interesting situations that I've been at Veterans Affairs. But was rewarding was we had a client. He was a retired military, served for over 30 years, and he received a disability award for his cancer of the lungs. So what has happened was the veteran wanted to remain at home because he's lived there for 30 years and he didn't want to go anywhere else. He wanted to spend the rest of his life at home. I was able to advocate for this client. We were able to provide all the necessary equipment for him at his home, like hospital beds, nursing care, occupational therapy was also recommended. Palliative consults were also recommended. Oxygen therapy, and regular nursing visits. But yeah, up to this date, I still remember that man, and he held my hand and said, "Thank you so much for doing this, because now I know I'm gonna leave." Sorry, I'm getting so emotional. That I can leave this knowing that Veterans Affairs had my back, because I've lost hope. But you coming here allowed me to realize that there's still hope out there, that all the service I did for my country is all worth it.
A message from the Government of Canada. If you've served in the Canadian Armed Forces or RCMP, there are services for finances, career development, education, mental health, and PTSD to support you and your family.
Welcome back, everybody. So we are now going to be starting off our segment, How Do I Set Up My Financial Nest Egg? So I would actually like to welcome Robert Zanfer. He is from Nesbitt Burns, and he will be advising us today. Hi, Rob. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm going to hand it over to you. Let us know a little bit about what you're going to be talking to us about today.
So first and foremost, thank you to Coding for Veterans, Jeff, and everyone attending, and thank you for hosting. I'm glad to be able to join. A little bit about myself. So I've actually been in the industry for over 10 years. I'm part of a team, and I'm gonna share right now the team that I am on. Let's see if this works. There we are. So I'm part of a broader team. We have 2 senior partners, myself as well as 2 assistants. We manage about $750 million for clients ranging from institutional clients to retirees and individuals who are just looking for money management, investment advice, financial planning, estate and tax planning, that sort of thing. So that's generally our forte. That's what I focused on along with my partners and our assistants as part of our group.
Amazing. So I'm going to kickstart with some curious questions that everyone is burning to ask. First and foremost, what is the #1 mistake people make when investing their money?
So I think the biggest issue is people start off with the idea that they have a set return they need to get to. So people will have a number like 5 or 10%, and they say, okay, well, this is what I want to generate with my investments. And I personally, and I think this is not just my opinion, I think it's categorically wrong. I don't want to get too in the weeds, but ultimately, the reason why we try to accumulate money is it's a means to an end. So really where the optimal place to start from an investment standpoint is, what do you need the money for? It's key to understand if you're investing for retirement, what kind of a runway you have. Your investment horizon will generally dictate the kind of risks you take, the kind of investments you make. So if I've got somebody in front of me, for example, who is 30 or 40 years old and is looking at being in the workforce for 20 to 30 years, and we're planning for retirement, that's generally going to be a different conversation than if I have somebody in front of me who is maybe 5 years away from retirement or has a goal like buying a home, for example, where we have a little bit of a shorter window, which will dictate risk for us. I think it's really important for individuals not to get too wrapped up in, what kind of a return do I need to get, or talking to your friends at a party, which I think is a very common issue because people tend to brag about their winners, not their losers, and actually focus on the end goals and what they need in order to get there. For some people, depending on what kind of a pension they have or what other sources of income they might have, they may not need to take on the kind of risks that will be necessary in order to achieve a 10 or a 15% return, and rather they may be able to take a more conservative approach in order to get to their end goal, whether that be retirement or what have you.
Wow, no, that's actually very well said. It makes a lot of sense. And I'm hoping that is something that becomes more of a general knowledge amongst all, because I don't think it is at the moment. So thanks for that.
I agree.
Another curious question is, so another question for our viewers is, give us a walkthrough of Investing 101 for anybody that's beginning to basically know what kind of opportunities are out there for us and our viewers.
Yeah, so I think from an investment standpoint, you have to look at what your beginning point is. So, and it doesn't really matter whether you have an investment portfolio that you've already kind of been managing, or if you're starting from scratch, starting from zero. The key thing to keep in mind is, what do you want to do with your money, and do you want it managed, or do you even need it to be managed? So that's really the first and most important question, which is, do I need a money manager, or can I do this on my own? As a general rule of thumb, if, for example, you have, let's just for argument's sake, $100,000 or $200,000, you've got a strong pension, you don't have any complex tax considerations, or there's no real issues with estate planning, you don't own a bunch of properties or things of that nature, the complexity of your financial picture will usually dictate whether you need an advisor or not. Because contrary to popular opinion, advisors really should not be just folks who pitch you on stock ideas. That may have been the case, when Gordon Gekko was given advice to Charlie Sheen, but that's not the case anymore. Mm-hmm. The reality is that an investment advisor, a financial advisor, a financial planner, as these things tend to be interchangeable, they should be able to advise you on all the ancillary aspects of your financial life, not just be able to tell you whether Amazon or Google is a good buy this month. So that's really the first step. So if you determine that your situation is fairly straightforward, and you want to go it on your own, because truthfully you're not bound to that decision, you can always go and engage an advisor at some point in the future, then it becomes a question of, well, what platform should you use? And this is a dual consideration, because you should, as I mentioned in my first point, you should put together at least a basic forecast, a plan for yourself if you're going to do it on your own, so that you understand, this is my starting point, this is what I need to save, and these are what my returns would need to look like in order to attain the kind of retirement or whatever other financial goal you've set forth for yourself. The platform from a trading standpoint is then also important. I think, especially with what's happened in the news recently, as we've seen down in the US with Robinhood, nothing is for free, even when it comes to trading. You may have platforms, and we have Wealthsimple, for example, in Canada, which will tell you that trading is free. Generally speaking, there's nothing free. And so as we saw with Robinhood was funded quite a bit by one of the big hedge funds. And the reason for that is that these hedge funds tend to front run the trades of regular retail investors, and we'll also make use of the data. And sometimes those free platforms can also break down, as we also saw in the US with the situation with GameStop that made it all the way to Congress. So choosing a platform is very, very important. And you should do your own research. At the end of the day, I'm not here to tell you whether one platform is better than the other. It will depend. For most investors, it'll be about the interface. Are you comfortable? Can you access research? Because that's a big part of doing it yourself. Ultimately, your success will be a function of time and effort, as is the case with most things. And so that's the way I would proceed on that front. On the flip side, if you determine that there are some complexities to your financial life and that you do want to engage an advisor, there are 5 keys that I would say are important for the individual investor to keep in mind. And this is, whether you're a former service member or not, I think it's important to have a list. And this is what I've generally come up with and what I've advised people to look at. The first is, and I've touched on this, is what kind of advice is offered. If your advisor is telling you that they're basically just going to tell you about products, that's generally a poor place to start. And a good way to weed out one-dimensional advisors is to ask them what they can offer you in terms of advice. Is there financial planning? If there is, what kind of designation do they have? Are they simply calling themselves a financial planner, or do they have a CFP, for example, which takes a couple of years to attain, and you have to do some courses as well? Is there tax advice involved? Is there estate planning? These are the sort of ways that you can weed out the folks that are either in it to make a quick buck, or they just aren't multidimensional in terms of the services that they offer. The second thing, so do they have the ability and the freedom to advise you and offer securities in any domain? This is a good way to weed out the branch advisors that are going to pitch you on whatever the bank has that week, that month, that year in terms of funds. I'm not here to speak pejoratively about funds, but when you have somebody that can only offer you one product, implicitly it's going to be hard to find value in their advice when they can't really look at anything else other than what they're being told they can sell to you. So having an idea of what can be offered, whether it's bonds, stocks, ETFs, the more available securities that an advisor has to be able to put you into, the more objective they're going to tend to be. And that's good, because that person's going to be working on your behalf, ultimately, not on the mutual fund's behalf. Now, in terms of what to look for next, you can't get away from fees. You have to establish what the fees are going to be for the advice and what you're getting. And this goes back to my first point. If a good advisor is going to charge you between 1% and 1.5%, what else are they going to do? Are they going to give you other financial advice? Are they going to be able to communicate with your tax advisor, for example? Are they going to be able to look at your estate? Can they give you some advice on insurance? These are very important things because, ultimately, the value of an advisor, as I said earlier, is not their ability to pick a great stock. That's valuable, and you should look at that, but it's what else they're able to do, because generally speaking, that's the stuff that you can control. If I can find tax efficiencies for you, that's something I can control more so than, I go back to, again, whether Amazon shoots up 5, 10, or 15 or 20%. The next thing I would look at is, what kind of clients do they have? Is the person that you're sitting across, or, on a Zoom call across from, are they one person that's just started out in the business? Or on the flip side, are they somebody that's done exceptionally well and has quite a few clients? These two opposite ends of the spectrum, it's important to establish where the prospective advisor fits, because somebody who becomes essentially a victim of their own success can be just as bad for you as an investor as a newbie advisor. If you have folks out there who are managing 400 or 500 clients and have $500 million under management, you have to ask yourself, where do you fit in for that advisor, and are they going to be able to dedicate the kind of time that's necessary for you to be able to fulfill your goals? And that really brings me to my last point, which is, You have to ultimately treat this process as a hiring process. You're bringing somebody on, you're going to pay them in order for them to manage your money. You have to be comfortable with the person in front of you. You have to be able to foresee building trust. And ultimately, if you want to add to that criteria, you should, because ultimately it's your money. And if, for example, you want to ask for a reference, ask for a reference. It's quite normal. I don't think enough clients do that. And it'll give you a good indication of the kind of person you have in front of you.
Yeah, no, I agree. That is actually very sound advice. It is like a job interview, and it is okay to ask for references. And I think a lot of times people are hesitant and they look to information that's more massively available, which I guess does lead to trend investing, which leads to the more recent situations with Wealthsimple and Robinhood and all of that. So with that said, actually, I'm curious to ask you, I know you said what qualities we should look for when looking for an investor, or not, what qualities not to look for, I guess you said. Now, would you recommend any particular websites or social media followings that new beginners that are getting into investment could follow through on? Or would you say do more solid research and go to professionals at establishments? Or would there be websites that are available that you could recommend to our viewers?
I think you can do both. First thing I'll say is get as much free advice as you can. So anytime you have the opportunity to speak with somebody, pick their brain, an individual that's in the industry, you should absolutely take advantage of that. And also, obviously use the internet. There are a lot of great sources. A few that I use right at the beginning and I still use from time to time are Globe Investor, which is the Globe and Mail. It's a very, very useful site. Information on funds and ETFs primarily. Morningstar is also really, really good just for basic research. And from a social media standpoint, this is where I would caution investors to be careful, because you can get really caught up depending on who you're following in a sort of an echo chamber. I think this can sometimes happen. We saw this with the whole Wall Street Bets forum on Reddit, which before the whole GameStop situation was an interesting place. You would sometimes get some good information on there and understand what retail investors are doing, but I wouldn't use that as a source from an investment standpoint. That's more of a curiosity. What I would do is I would use Twitter, for example, to follow individuals that are contrarian to your view. Once you establish a view and you've done some of your research, if you're very bullish and you think the market is going to go up and you only see sunshine, you should probably follow people that have the opposite view. Somebody that, and I'm using myself as an example, somebody that I follow is Nouriel Roubini, economist, and he's got the nickname Dr. Doom because he always sees dark clouds on the horizon. It's good to get these perspectives that challenge your own, especially when you're a do-it-yourself investor, to be able to question whether the moves that you might be making in that day or in that quarter are actually correct for your portfolio. So that's the way I would employ social media and all media sources. CNBC is another one I'll just add at the end here. Although I'm a little concerned about CNBC primarily, and the fact that they will sometimes use the show essentially as a mechanism to pitch certain stocks. I think you have to be careful as an investor when you're seeing a stock flash across your screen. You're really downstream from the information, so it's not necessarily an indication that you should rush out and buy. But if you use the website and their apps to do research on different stocks and look at charts, that can also be useful.
No, that's actually very, very useful information. It's not okay to just say, oh, social media is bad. These informal forums are not good and it leads to bad invest. No, it's true what you say. You have to be smart about it. And there are certain particular platforms or people you can follow with a history, built history, to ensure what you're doing is on the correct path. No, that's very well. So something for our veterans specifically. What should our veterans more specifically look for when selecting an investment advisor? Is it the same as a layperson, or is there something special that they should look for with funding available to them or things of that sort?
So what I would say, I don't think there's anything truly specific for a former service member, and take this with a grain of salt because I have not served, and so I don't think I would have any special insight. But what I will say is this: in terms of what they should look for is what they should also, I would say, already have them themselves. I'm not pandering here, but I think former service members are more likely to have discipline. And discipline is what you need from an investment standpoint, whether you're doing it yourself or you're overseeing your advisors, they manage your money, in terms of investment philosophy. And I think that's key for former service members to keep in mind. Is there a discipline? Does your investment advisor have an area of expertise that they can clearly describe to you so that you can understand how they're going to manage your money? The same goes if you're doing it yourself. Are you going to stick to a discipline? Are you going to do the research? And if not, then maybe you should bring somebody on. But that, if there's one word I would say, it's discipline.
No, that's actually very true. That is a quality that is available amongst veterans very specifically, and that is a quality that would be very beneficial in investing. We have a question from a viewer, and the question is, could you please explain the different investment vehicles that are offered? Sorry, one more minute. That are offered, low risk versus high risk, T-bills versus stocks.
Absolutely. So I'll start with the first part of the question, which are the different vehicles, and that's a fantastic question. We could probably just spend our entire time having a discussion around two of these vehicles, which are RSPs and TFSAs. Now, for a lot of Canadians, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding into how to have these accounts complement each other. So an RSP, as most of us know, you wait until you're close to tax time. You may consult with your investment advisor or tax advisor and determine how much to put in your RSP and take the deduction. The TFSA is a little different than that. You cannot deduct any of your contributions to your TFSA. However, unlike an RSP, it's a true tax shelter. There's a bit of a misconception. Your RSP, yes, you do get to grow your money. It is sheltered from tax on the capital gains that you'll have in the income in that account. But when you eventually have to collapse it, and we all have to do it in the year after which we turn 71, you're going to have to take money out of that account on an ever-escalating basis, as it will need to be depleted by law when you convert it into a RIF, which is a Registered Retirement Income Fund. It's just an RSP that turns into an income source. So now you're paying tax on all of that money. Now, you're not paying tax on the growth, but you're paying effectively income tax on the amount that you're taking out. On the flip side, the TFSA, yes, you didn't get that deduction and there wasn't a net benefit, but it wasn't a tax deferral vehicle. It's a true tax shelter, meaning that come retirement or come the time when you need to withdraw that money, you can do so without any sort of tax implications. And I think that can be very useful come retirement in order to mitigate the amount that you're paying to the CRA, depending on the various sources of income. And this is really where financial planning comes in. But if you've got a lot of taxable sources, and for most of us, we've got CPP, we've got OAS. If you've got some sort of a pension, that is generally taxable. And so if you add to that your RSP, you could end up being in quite a high tax bracket depending on how much you're drawing out on an annual basis. A good way to mitigate or bring down the amount of tax you're paying is to draw from your TFSA. And you can only do that if you've treated your TFSA as a true retirement investment vehicle, which is ultimately the way I see it. I think the misconception for many of us was that, there is the term savings in TFSA. And a lot of people treated it as effectively a savings account, which it's really a gross misuse of the account because, especially now with the kind of interest rates we're seeing on cash savings, you wouldn't be taxed very much when you're making less than 1% on whatever your savings are. And so ultimately, the best way to use your TFSA, and this brings me to the second part of the question, is to have your most aggressive investments. And so if I remember the question correctly, it had to do with T-bills and stocks and so forth. Well, T-bills or bonds are going to pay you effectively what amounts to a regular interest amount with bonds. It's a coupon. And so that gets taxed as income, which is generally at the highest marginal rate, depending on what tax bracket you're in. That isn't necessarily the sort of thing you would want to put in your TFSA. The reason being, again, is it's a true tax shelter. So even for a conservative investor, quote unquote conservative, you're going to have some stocks, some more aggressive investments. Excuse me. Well, these should be in your TFSA because ultimately your goal as an investor is to grow that account as rapidly and as aggressively as possible so that when you get to that end point, which ostensibly is retirement, you'll have more to draw upon, which means that, just to use round numbers, if your goal in retirement is to have $100,000 each year, so, about $8,250 each month going into your bank account, if some of that, 25 or 30% of that or 20% of that can come from a tax-free savings account, then effectively, even though the amount you're taking out is $100,000, you'd only be taxed on 80 if the other sources to get to that figure were taxable. That can make a big difference when we're talking about, especially now with where we're headed from a life expectancy standpoint. A lot of people are going to be retired for upwards of 30 years. When you extrapolate the kind of tax savings that can have over that period of time, it can make a monumental difference, which is why when we build portfolios, we do take care to have a view of how the TFSA should be invested versus the RSP versus non-registered accounts, which are simply accounts once you've fulfilled the maximum that you have in your RSP and your TFSA, then you have no choice but to invest the money non-registered, which necessitates a different strategy. But I'll leave that for another time.
No, you're right. This is definitely a topic that can be spoken on for hours on end and can have a whole segment of its own. But you did touch on some very important information still that our viewers can hopefully incorporate. Just a question, actually. It's interesting you said earlier that nothing's ever free in investing. Even with Wealthsimple, there's always some kind of fees involved. So one of our viewers actually had an inquiry, which is, does Nesbitt Burns or BMO have any offers with CAF members in regards to fees? Is there any fee discounts available to our Army veterans?
So although the bank writ large does not have, as far as I understand, something that's standard in place, our group, we do take that into consideration, and it's something that I've talked about with Jeff. He's put it on my radar as well, and I think it's something that we will work towards because I think it is important for there to be some sort of an incentive for our service members to get advice, which is very important ultimately.
Yeah, no, definitely. For our members that are just currently transitioning and our members that are also looking to retire, those are different philosophies that they can follow. And you actually provided us with a lot of important information, some jewels that hopefully our viewers can incorporate. And whether they're new or they're looking to retire, it's information that's going to be helpful to them. So thank you so much for joining us today, Robert. And we really appreciate your knowledge and you speaking to us. So thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And we are now going to be moving on to our next segment. I will be introducing to you Pat Shaw, the COO and the academic director here at Coding for Veterans. Hey, Pat.
Hi, Mel.
I will let you introduce your panel.
Okay, John Proctor, are you standing by? Is this the plan? So John is quite a friend of Coding for Veterans. John has joined us at the TSX ringing of the bell to open the Toronto Stock Exchange at a couple of occasions in the past when we were able to gather. And John brings quite an interesting, from my perspective, an interesting military career, having been in the British Armed Forces and the Canadian Armed Forces. And John, just before we get to what it is that you're doing now, I wanted to ask you that question that has been raised a couple of times so far today, and that's the one around when you were releasing and transitioning. did you have a plan to become CEO of a global cybersecurity firm?
No, not really, not sort of that level of plan, but certainly a plan enough to get into the tech industry and cybersecurity in particular.
So what was the logic for what was your last role in the armed forces that led you to the logic of software and cybersecurity?
So my last role was as an INTO, and part of sort of that role, and it comes back to sort of making the plan to transition, is do your homework. And part of that homework was very much what roles are out there that, you know, a veteran, you know, somebody with 22 years of service would fit into. Where would the business community be interested in? And this was 2010, so a few years back now. But at that stage, cybersecurity was sort of picking up momentum, and there was a lot of chatter about it. And if you looked at it, sort of, you know, the intelligence world for years had sort of been sort of balancing this, you know, the technology versus the human for the intelligence environment, and sort of, you know, do you rely on sensors or do you need boots on the ground? And it's the balance of both. And I realized cybersecurity was going to be a bit of that as well. And if you didn't have sort of analysis and capabilities just with all the technology, it wasn't going to work. So from my mind, it seemed like a good time to step out and pick up a few cyber qualifications and step into that industry.
So we have heard also over the course of the day people saying that they and the direct quote was had to eat a little bit of humble pie. Didn't exactly launch right into a VP or a CEO kind of role. But can you speak a little bit about the steps in your transition and how that fit with your idea of the plan when you first started to implement it?
Yeah, the early step really is recognizing you're making a cultural shift and you're moving to another organization. And, you know, for all the folks on this, all the veterans on this call, not one of us deployed without some sort of pre-deployment training, right? Without some understanding of the environment we were going into, whether it was Afghanistan and we did cultural training, you know, whatever it was, we, you know, saw all that sort of going on. So this was kind of the same thing as saying, how do I get myself ready to make this transition? How do I get my head around this cultural shift? And I think that becomes so important. It is a different culture, right? The business world is a different culture to the military world. The military culture is unique. It truly is. And we've all, I'd say the vast majority have benefited it in some way or other from it. Other people have suffered in some way or other from it. But it has, to a certain degree, shaped us, changed us, formed us. And for those of us who joined up early, right, these were our formative years. You know, joining the military 18 plus. You know, those are your forming years. But then you go into this industry where they haven't had the same experiences, the same background, and you've got to understand that culture. So finding the people who can guide you, finding the mentors to say, this is the culture you're going into. You know, when you go to Afghanistan, you had cultural training, but then you still had a translator, right? Unless you were fluent in the local language, you had a translator. So you still need a translator. You still need to have somebody who's going to help translate this culture, the nuances of business to you. And for me, it was folks like Treble Victor. It was folks who'd made the transition ahead of me, and reaching out, making those connections, finding mentors, finding guides to navigate the system became important.
And so, when did you come to connect with Treble Victor? But we're in that path, and my follow-on question is: are there other sources or organizations that supported you in that progress or the path as you moved along your transition?
Oh, there we go. I'm back in. Sorry, I'd gone back into the waiting space. Yeah, no, I got your point. So I got to Travel Victor fairly early when it was just Toronto, and I met some of the early founders there and got some early guidance, and that's been great. But the point is saying it doesn't stop, right? It doesn't, just because, I've met these guys earlier and cool, I've had my guidance, I'm now off, you stay connected. And I've, even through the business journey, as you said, I've made my own transition, my own jumps within the business community. I now, run a publicly traded company that's on the TSX. I reached out to Travel Victor guys who worked on Bay Street because that was a huge leap for me, and said, so how do I do this? Right? How do I connect with Bay Street? How does that work? How does the investment community work? How does the, how do the traders work? So all of these things become really quite important. And then expanding the chapters. And I think that's the other thing, is sort of giving back into that community. I probably have 1 or 2 reaches out a month for people saying, hey, can you give me some advice? And the answers are, always yes. Do you want to meet up? Now it's online, but before it was always meet up for a coffee or a tea and say, so what are you planning? And it might not be you want to come into the tech industry. It might be you want to go somewhere else, but let me have a look at your resume. Let me, see if I know somebody, because again, it's all about the network, connecting people through and allowing people to meet up.
Yeah, and for those listening in, I can attest to that John, you've got to be a very busy guy running a global shop like you are, and you've been very generous with your time to participate in roundtables as we're gathering data around the impact of COVID on work from home or distributed working concepts. And maybe you started to talk about that in terms of what's happening in the way of staying connected during this unprecedented time. Could you expand a little bit and maybe tell us a bit about how it's happening within your business, but specifically, how would you encourage people coming into or transitioning, coming into their civilian life at this time when travel and face-to-face is so restricted?
Yeah, I guess the first part is, at the moment, business is really freaking hard. And if anyone's telling you differently, they're smoking, Canada's legal product. That's a true reality. I mean, we as a company last year, we took a 15% pay cut across the board. And if you're the guy in charge, you go first, right? You take the 15% pay cut first, and you show that, lead by example as always. That's kind of the key. And it's still hard. I mean, we're still growing. We've done acquisitions during COVID, but it's still difficult, and everyone's working their ass off, really. And I think it becomes really important to keep sort of the social infrastructure that's been really hard within the company, is making sure we stay interconnected, making sure people still have some sort of social connection despite everybody working at home. And the other thing, everyone's different. For some people, this has been really, really hard, working from home. They've got small children at home. For others, and some of our tech guys, this has been the best thing ever. They can sit in their gaming chair all day. They can write code all day and then play games in the evening, not ever moving from the chair. And they couldn't be happier. So again, you've got a whole spectrum of people, with different pressures, different stresses, and different levels of enjoyment of working from home. So again, it's recognizing that and pulling it all through, but it's also making sure the company truly understands and has a vision of what are we trying to do here? What are we trying to do as a company? And the more you have sort of adults that you can trust, the better that's going to work.
Yeah, John, maybe could you speak a little bit more on how you get to that insight that you just shared? As you were leaving the forces, with the experience and development in 2 bodies of military culture, how did you, was there an aha moment at some point where you said, oh my God, this isn't like being in the military? Or, there's so much of what I did in the forces that is relevant here. I can make this work.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly had my aha moment. I had the pleasure of doing a TED talk a couple of years back, and I talked about it there. I can remember getting off the train at Union Station and walking out, and I was trying to go and meet some companies in Toronto, and I'd come down from Ottawa on the train, and got off at Union Station and just ground to the halt, right? It was just so busy, and I was looking at these buildings going, how the hell do I go meet clients in these buildings? Right? I don't know how to navigate this. I don't know how to do this. And it wasn't quite a panic attack, but it was certainly a massive confidence attack to say, you don't have the experience to do this. You're winging it. And the answer is, yeah, sure as hell was. And you've got to try and step through into that. And I think that's the piece. But again, it comes back to, which is, and I've used this analogy before, coming out of the military is a bit like coming up from a deep dive. And we're all coming up to effectively the surface, as it were, and call it the surface is the world outside the military. And for people who've been close to the surface, they've worked in jobs in the military that are fairly well aligned to civilian culture, be it lawyers or medics or whatever it is, where they've had contact with the civilian world outside. It's a little bit easier to get to the surface. If you're somebody who's combat arms or something similar that has had no contact with the outside world, and your role you've had is so different in the military world, I do believe that's a harder transition for a whole bunch of people. And that's what I said is we need to, do a gap analysis as people transition out of the military. Do that gap analysis from where they are in the military to where they want to be in the civilian world, and say, what are the skill sets? Because the military, as we know it, is not unified, right? There's so many different trades and branches, and many of us make jokes about the Air Force living in hotels all the time, while the Air Force military, the Army's in the field and all points in between, right? But we're all different, and that gap analysis, I think, is a key aspect of saying, where am I within the military? How deep am I inside that military culture, and where do I want to be in the future?
Oh, that's a great point. I just grabbed a note from one of our students, as many of the people on the call know that through Coding for Veterans, we include an organizational behavior course in our technical skills. And one student who just recently graduated from the software stream said that the organizational behavior course was astounding. It was fantastic for me. And I gained a tremendous amount of insight from the coursework that I wish I would have learned 10 years ago. And the reason I raise that is that reinforces your point that for some people there is an aha moment. And for others, it's that old boil the frog metaphor that, the water temperature just keeps going up, and then all of a sudden, you're cooked. And so back me up to some of the career steps. Like, how did you know to make a move from CGI, which is well regarded as a tech and a cyber company, and who would you have been looking to for counsel or support, or to have your back in that kind of a major shift, a major move?
Yeah, sure. I've sort of been at CGI for 6 years, and I think that's kind of an important point of saying, when you get to your sort of early company, right, don't start looking around first, get settled, get understanding. That's your apprenticeship position, right? Learn that point. And I sort of moved up some levels within CGI, and again, finding mentors inside and outside. And then through my network, the role at Martello was discussed. And again, I was lucky to be able to then bounce sort of that off. The other thing is, your family's part of that conversation, right? This is not the military where it's, some nice career manager is going to say, this is your next job, good luck, right? You have a lot of choices. You can choose to quit, you can choose to resign, you can choose to move, you can choose to stay, but they can also choose to fire you. So that's also part of the other downside. So discussing with your family, saying, this is the move I'm thinking of, these are the benefits, but these are the risks. I could fall flat on my face, on this new role, and what that will mean is I'll be out of a job. You have to have those conversations with the family. It's not, we talk about the difference between organizational courage and physical courage. In the military, no matter how bad a job, you'll generally get paid, right? And there's a lot of people on this call who will say, I've sat next to a guy who came in at 9, went to the gym between 1 and 2, then had his lunch at his desk between 2 and 3, and finally went home at 4 o'clock. and he got paid exactly the same as the guy sitting next to him who bust his ass 9 hours a day, went to the gym at 6 before he came in because he knew he was so busy. Well, civilian industry is not like that. We pay you based on outcomes. And if you're not achieving, we'll move you out. And there is a, understanding that cultural shift becomes really, really important.
John, is there one element of that cultural shift that presents more of a problem, do you think, not necessarily about you personally, but you through Treble Victor, through your own firm, you're encountering veterans moving into the workforce, the civilian workforce. Is there one thing that you think that everybody better be looking at and make sure they've got a check mark beside?
So I'd say there's two pieces of that. The first is coming out to be humble, right? Humility, right? Accept you're moving into something new. And, there's two aspects of ways of looking at this piece, which is if you go to, a bookstore in Canada, there's many more books on business leadership than there are on military leadership, right? Just because you've been in the military and you come out and say, I'm a leader, there's an awful lot of business leaders out there who are really, really good at leading in their culture. So don't assume you can come out and take over from them. And on the flip side of that, saying, coming out saying, yeah, but, I've been a leader in the military, so I can go and do X. Well, we wouldn't expect a business leader to come and say, well, I can come and lead a battle group. It's too different. Right. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, I can come out and lead a civilian organization, but you wouldn't allow the civilian to come and lead the military organization, right? So you got to come out, be humble, and accept that you're going to do some learning and learn some different aspects, and then step through based on that. And yes, you got a wealth of experience and leadership, but you've got to be adaptable, and that becomes key. And then the second piece really is that game plan, right? Having that plan that says, this is the lifestyle I want. And again, there's a whole bunch of people who said, I'm happy with a certain lifestyle when I come out. My pension gives me, and by the way, if you're 2 or 3 years away from your pension, stay the hell in, right? I'm sorry, even if your job sucks a little, keep going, right? That pension is worth its weight in gold, literally. So I'm sorry, that pension is extremely valuable. Keep going. And then have the game plan of saying, but when I leave, this is what do I want? Do I want a lifestyle job? So a fun job that allows me to do what I want? Do I want to create a business that's about me and what I like to do? Or do I want to really go and sort of, make big money and go do something else? And I really think having those sort of mindset around, this is my plan, and have the humility to go and learn how to go and execute that plan, those are the keys.
John, that's a great perspective. We're closing in to the end of our time, but I like the way that you kind of bundled all of that together. And there are organizations, and especially as you pointed out, Treble Victor is expanding across the country now. And so if wherever you are on this call, do check in with the Treble Victor website and look for where that next meeting or that next community is being established. And John, could they reach out to you, or you could redirect them somewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen a couple of pop-ups from people pinging me on LinkedIn already, which I'm delighted about. So please, reach out, connect, and I can tell you all about mistakes I made, because that's the only way we've got this knowledge is by making mistakes. It didn't just happen by osmosis, but really sort of the network is the piece that was so important to help guide me, and get this moving.
And I'm delighted that you can use that practical example of LinkedIn, because lots of people have talked about it. How do I get on LinkedIn? And increasingly, that's an important networking platform for people who want to go into a profession or cybersecurity or software as well. So, John, I want to thank you. I think that Jeff, it must be, I should be handing this back to you. I think you've got your panel ready to go, and I'll be jumping out right now. So thanks a lot, John, and over to you, Jeff.
You know what? We let's I want to introduce the panel. What a great segue, Pat, between your discussion with John and the next topic that we're covering here, because it's very important to look at things as a career versus just getting a job. And we've got 4 great panelists joining us here today that can really provide some insight in terms of those next steps. So I'd like to call upon Serge, Chris, Scott, and Anthony on the screen here. They'll each give a little bit of an intro on themselves, and then we will jump into the panel. So welcome, guys. We appreciate your time. Serge, give a brief intro, and then we'll go on to Chris, Scott, and finish up with Anthony.
All right, so happy to be here on this very gender unbalanced panel, but worthwhile nonetheless, I hope. Listen, so Serge, I've been at the University of Ottawa for close to 30 years now, thinking about retirement, as John has just pointed out. But best job I've ever held is being executive director of the Professional Development Institute here. And this is really where the university integrates with industry, integrates with the real world out there, and where we can, maintain what we call a lifelong learning path with our graduates and other professionals. I'll have a chance to talk a bit more about that in a minute.
Awesome. Chris?
Perfect. Hi, everybody. Chris Henneberry. I'm a client partner with SAP. SAP is a large enterprise software company all over the world, about 120,000 people in the company. I work specifically in the west of North America with Fortune 50 companies. So basically the Googles and Starbucks and Apples of the world. I work with those guys every day. Used to travel a lot, not so much anymore. I'm also, I've started multiple businesses in the past and sold them. I started Soldier to Leader, which is a program that helps veterans and transitioning soldiers find mentors in the careers that they want to break into. And I'm also a Master Warrant Officer with the Royal Westminster Regiment here in New Westminster, British Columbia. And I'm very happy and excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Scott, over to you.
Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. As the other panelists have said, I really think this is a great opportunity to speak directly to some of our brethren. I'm the Director General of Security Management and Governance in Shared Services Canada. Started my post-military career as a public servant with National Defence, and I've leapfrogged around. I've been with SSC here now for about 3.5 years. Part of the Veterans Network here in SSC. SSC is an awesome place to work. There are so many military connections. So many of my peers are ex-military. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. And Anthony, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. So very quickly, Anthony, based out of Montreal, Quebec. So the odd Quebec reservist in here. Feel free to poke fun as much as you like. Obviously, my first love, my first passion is definitely the Canadian Armed Forces. So I joined the reserves at 18 on a bit of a bet with a buddy, thinking I'd do it for a summer, and then quickly turned into very much a passion project for me, and that's something I'm still involved in. So I'm with the Canadian Grenadier Guards, where I'm a sergeant. And about 4 years ago, after 2 deployments in a kind of short period of time, I decided to kind of jump over to the corporate space, and was very fortunate to land at Scotiabank, first in an internship role with HR talent acquisition. And I'm now currently a team lead here in Montreal, where I lead a small team of recruiters.
So, you know what? I'm going to stick with Anthony for the first question from this panel. Can you, Anthony, as team lead at Scotia for talent acquisition, what are the 1 or 2 soft skills that, you look for when hiring?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually just hired someone new on my team 2 weeks ago, so this is still very much top of mind for me. Really, I think the first thing I look for, and I think it's something we all naturally look for whenever we're connecting with people and especially hiring them, is, does this person fit? And obviously, when you're in that hiring manager seat, not just fit with me, but fit within the scope of my team and the company's values. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. And the second one being, does this person bring a growth mindset and a desire to learn and be open to new ideas? understanding that, you know, the roles on my team are generally more junior in scope. I'm looking for someone who has the capacity to grow and develop within our team and our organization.
And what kind of supports do you have as part of the business to help achieve those goals? Is there mentorship that the bank provides? Can you comment a little bit on that?
Yeah, it's funny you ask. We're actually launching a mentorship program for veterans, for our veteran community, which actually launches tomorrow. So what we did is essentially paired up business mentors, so non-veterans within the bank, just business leaders, VPs, directors, so on and so forth. And what we're doing is we're matching them up with veterans, with reservists within the bank who've raised their hand and said, "Hey, I'd like mentorship, and I'd like to be guided by someone more senior who can help me grow." So that support is definitely there.
Which is awesome, because that's really, you know, I think integral, and especially when we've been hearing today of, you know, having the supports, having the team, you know, bringing everything together. I want Scott to kind of chime in here. When you're building out your team at Shared Services Canada, what do you look for when you're hiring?
Great question. I mean, I'm in the business of IT security here at Shared Services Canada. So, you know, one of the primary things we look for is obviously skills or experience in that realm. It's a very niche area, but it's not the be all and end all. That's not to say that I'm looking for everybody I hire has to have 20 years experience, you know, doing security analysis. Added to that, you know, we look for those soft skills that you were just talking about. We look for things like the ability to communicate, leadership, project management, believe it or not, is huge. Trying to deliver IT services inside of government in whatever department you're in shared services, that's our primary focus, is really all about a sequenced, you know, series of events. And background project management, service management, things like ITIL and whatnot are always great skills to have. But we also look, when I interview someone, you know, there's usually two parts to the conversation. It's about, you know, your experience and your skills, both technical and non-technical, but it's also really about right fit. You know, do you have the right mentality and attitude? Are you willing to grow and learn? Are you willing to share your knowledge? Are you willing to take on problems and find solutions for them? So that right fit aspect of our interviews are very, very important.
And Scott, can you talk a little bit about the value of certifications? You know, you hear, you know, and industry recognized certifications, everything from CISSP to, you know, the value of that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's value in them. I mean, there's obviously value in them because it means you've gone through a formal program. CISSP is a foundational piece in my business. But there are other things, you know, cloud security certifications, security auditing certifications that are as equally important. But again, I go back to, you know, coming from a guy who never graduated from university, getting into the executive ranks of government took some effort. And it took some people recognizing in me that just because I didn't have the university degree didn't mean I had the cumulative experience and skill set to bring to the job. So, you know, in the absence of some of those certifications, people may have done similar things, and we need to look beyond the certs. But certainly, you know, those 4 and 5-letter acronyms after your name in the IT security world carry immediate impact because it's proven that you've been through a formal program and you've demonstrated not only the dedication to get it, but the knowledge you need to achieve that. And many of those are not one and done type certs, right? CISSP is a continuous journey and a continuous upgrading of skills. So those things are important for sure.
Which I think is great. I'm going to get Serge to chime in here. Serge, can you talk about, from an academic perspective at U Ottawa PDI, you know, the concept of lifelong learning, right? How there's been a shift from micro credentialing versus, you know, traditional university. We just heard from Scott. You know, he took a little bit different path, right? So can you comment on some of that?
Well, a very timely question because, you know, lifelong learning as we used to say at the university, it used to be the pickles and olives of the main dish, if you will. You know, it was a nice to have, but universities weren't really taking it seriously. Forward-looking universities these days are really integrating professional development in their core mission. Professional development in any good university will be mission critical. And the reason for that is that universities have recognized that knowledge doesn't stop at graduation day. On graduation day, you can't just, you know, shake hands and say have a good life and off you go. So the notion that work and study are two different things is frankly pretty obsolete now. And so we're reaching into the professional world in what we call the 60-year curriculum. It's basically, you know, we get you in at the university, we'll follow you throughout your entire career until you retire, probably. You know, so it's, you know, some call it the mafia model. You know, where when you join, you just can't leave anymore. You know, they're with you all the time, and it works. And this is not just for revenue generation. It's a recognition that learning occurs throughout your entire career. More so probably in areas like high tech. You know, I mean, the workplace in general is changing very rapidly. High tech even more so. And no sooner are you graduated from an engineering degree, for example, a computer science degree, that you're probably stale if you're not engaging in professional development. So that's where we come in, and that's how passionate I am about the job.
Yeah, which is great because, you know, you hit the nail on the head. I love the analogy with the mafia. You kind of get in, but you know what? You end up learning all the way through. And as technology continues to evolve, you have to stay plugged in. So I want Chris to kind of chime in. From SAP's perspective, what do you look for with hires that you hire people out of the military, and how do you support that lifelong learning model? We heard from Serge on the academic side. On industry, how do you support that?
Yeah, so there's a lot to be said to have your certs in place, depending on the role you're looking at. In North America, we have something like almost 900 veterans within the organization at this time. And, you know, there's one good thing about the military program. There's many great things, but one of the best things about it is it teaches you to be open, and that you know that your learning is going to be ongoing throughout your career. And so we've had quite a few universities give credit for people who are coming out of the military. And we've seen that. That's been a great way to transfer people directly out of leadership roles and into civilian roles. But specifically, when we look at someone coming into SAP, you know, it's been mentioned by a few that, you know, culture is a big thing. Coming out of the culture of military, moving into the culture of business, it's always a big shift. And it's probably one of the biggest struggles, I think, that we have with veterans who are transitioning. But honestly, you know, if they're open to learn, if they have and they bring that thirst to develop themselves, you know, it makes them really easy and attractive to put in front of people, to put in front of recruiters. I've hired hundreds of people over the years, and when I see a veteran, obviously that resonates with me. But we also recognize, and this is starting to happen more so in the United States, is that veterans fit within the D&I, within the diversity and side of things as well. That's understood in the US for sure. And it's starting to be recognized more in Canada. And that's one of the things I lead at SAP is understanding, well, veterans are a unique group, and we actually have to look at them and make concerted efforts to bring them in and to mentor them through that process. And we've actually started ramping that up through co-ops and getting people who are coming through the university programs, getting their technical degrees or getting their certs, and then moving into roles.
Which is great. And, you know, Anthony, can you talk about why Scotia Bank is, you know, really put an emphasis on hiring veterans, and, you know, talk a little bit more about that? You know, you have obviously the mentorship model, but what's specific about veterans really? You guys?
Yeah, for sure, Jeff. So first, simply put, the bank has a huge mandate, a huge focus on diversity and inclusion. And I'd be missing a key point if I didn't point that out first and foremost. So it's really the number one focus within talent acquisition in the bank right now, and it's a big focus throughout the rest of the bank. There are KPIs and kind of pillars in place to make sure that we're not only maintaining a level of diversity, but increasing it on a yearly basis. The next thing I should really point out is that Scotiabank, and I haven't worked for any other banks, but I know Scotiabank especially is a very proud military lineage. We identified quite a large number of the banker population who actually left their comfortable jobs at the bank in World War I and World War II and went out to Europe, to France to fight in the war. Many of them obviously didn't return. Some did. One actually, named Sidney Frost, went on to become the CEO of the bank. So I think, dating back all the way to World War I, we have that very proud military history, and I think that that's carried forward today, where we have a strong cohort of military veterans within the bank. And I think the bank realizes that veterans are part of that diversity picture, right? We bring quite a lot to the table. We're known for excelling in team environments. We're strong team players. We're adaptable. We're able to navigate uncertain environments, and the financial services industry, like we've seen with COVID, has had its fair share of those recently. And frankly, we're often a breath of fresh air for organizations that are often used to getting very much the same kind of profile of candidate. We come in with atypical backgrounds and bring a dynamic to teams and organizations that doesn't necessarily exist. So, in a nutshell, that's it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, because it's very much important to highlight that. Can you also talk a little bit about the importance, and I'm going to ask the other panelists, working in industry, this question: why is it important for veterans to focus on getting a career instead of a job, right? And so, Anthony, I'll let you lean in on that one.
Yeah, definitely. So, of all the questions you're asking, I think this, these are all great questions, but this one's maybe the most critical. I'll be honest, I really kind of bumbled my way into Scotiabank, and I was very lucky to do so. I had pretty much no corporate experience before getting into the bank. So I was quite fortunate in that I think I fell into a really good organization, and I had, good leadership, good management who was able to kind of guide me through my transition and tap into my soft skills. So I think for any veterans or anyone listening who's making a transition or thinking about it, if you're just looking to get a job for the sake of getting a paycheck, it's understandable. Everyone has bills to pay, but you're not setting yourself up for success, right? And I don't have the stats, but I think just from my personal experience, anecdotally, and the experiences of friends of mine, I'd like to see the numbers for veterans who stay in their first job, their first career, a year or two post release, right? I think most end up switching within the first 12 to 18 months. So when transitioning, I think we should really, think tactically, think strategically as well, and think about what you need to do at each level to make sure that you're in state of landing not just a job, but really a career is accomplished. So very quickly, I say, vet the company culture as much as you can, vet it almost more than the job or the role itself, and ask yourself, does my manager, do they understand my strengths? Do they understand my limitations? And will they fully support me and give me the tools I need to succeed, and in turn for them and their team to succeed?
Awesome. Scott, do you want to chime in from shared services perspective in terms of, that career versus job,
Yeah, for sure. I would echo exactly what Anthony said. I mean, everybody's got their own drivers and their own motivations for what they want to do after a career in the military. A job pays the bills, but you are going to be you're going to get more out of it. Your employer is going to get more out of it. And quite frankly, you're going to be happier if you embrace it as a career. You have so much to offer, and then, to me, the difference between a job and a career, if you tackle it as a career, you're going to make it better. Whether you're there for a year or 2 or 3 or 10, the skills you bring to bear are going to make where you went, by the time you leave it, you're going to have moved the bar. You're going to have made things better. You're going to have advanced stuff, as opposed to, this is something to bump up my pension or pay my bills. Those are all valid things too. We all face, those things in our life. But I would connect it to the skills that military folks bring that are inherent in it's been instilled in them, no matter what you did. I was a Mars officer in the Navy, and unless I joined DFO or the Coast Guard, I wasn't going to do a job like I did in the Navy. So I leveraged some of the tech background I had prior, got some training, but really approached it as, I see a problem, I want to make it better. And those things come out in your interviews. You asked me earlier about what I look for in an interview. That whole attitude of jumping in, being part of that team, helping us move the bar ahead in any number of areas. I work in government. We got lots of things to improve all the time. So I think it's a state of mind that not only makes your work stronger, makes you better, and makes the organization you join that much better.
Which is great. And Chris, you want to chime in from SAP's perspective on that?
Yeah, no, it's. I think you're touching on a really important point here. In the military, you have your career manager, and a lot of this is kind of managed for you, right? Once you get out into the civilian world, you have to be really deliberate in your approach. And so what I've told people that have helped through that mentoring program is that they have to understand is do your research, understand what it is, the field that you want to break into. If it is technology or whatever it is you're trying to break into, do your research, but be really deliberate on your approach. And what we found is that those people who kind of make that commitment to be deliberate, and then we line them up with the right people and they start going down that path, have a much better outcome than taking the more organic and just kind of waiting for it to fall in your lap. It's the difference between passive towards your career and being a lot more assertive. I think those people that can do that can make that jump to being really forthright in how they're going to actually pursue it, hands down have much better results.
And you know what? That's true with a lot of things in life, just not sort of in tech. But I want to shift the discussion back to Surgeon a little bit with the University of Ottawa, because what we've heard from these other panelists are establishing that career, not a job. And we know that education is really one of those key success factors. So can you comment on the value of certifications, a university education, and why that matters more than kind of just, free stuff out there, and the value that brings to career stability, income,
right.
all that.
Right. Yeah. And just a caveat, I don't want this to sound like an infomercial, but like being from a university, of course I'm sold on the notion of, university certification and industry certification. I guess it's a question of, is it good or is it good enough? What are you looking for? Good or good enough? And same thing for employers. Some employers will recognize, those free certificates that you can get online. I mean, they're a dime a dozen. There's lots of stuff out there. And in some case, that is absolutely appropriate. But I would say that the more important the job and the more important the employer, the more important it becomes to have that credentialing. Because it's a lot harder to navigate your way up, as Scott has indicated earlier, if you don't have that. People won't let you close to a server with a screwdriver if you don't have something to show for and have proven that you have a formal background to yourself, to you. The notion, however, and I'd just like to demystify this idea that going to a university means getting yourself into a 4-year program or 2-year master's degree. Nobody has the time or the money for that. And universities, as we said before, are really getting into the micro programming concepts where people can sign up for 30, 40, 60-hour courses that really provides certified credentialing, so qualifications from the university on a transcript, credit equivalent transcripts that allows you to stack. The stackable model is where you stack these learning opportunities on top of each other, and then these credits can then be transferred over to a formal program if you want, or you will get recognition for those credits down the line. And that, as I said, is very important for the top employers that we know, both private and public sector.
Absolutely. And can you comment the effect that COVID has had? Is obviously, I mean, I can speak with the Coding for Veterans program. From the outset, it was delivered 100% online. I have jokingly tell people we anticipated the pandemic, right? Which we all know why we didn't. But
yeah. You're the Bill Gates of this world. Yeah,
exactly. I like to think so. But can you talk about the move to online learning, and what in the doors that really opens?
Well, it has kicked us in the right place in a way. Like it came at a time when, contrary to you, all our programming, and we offer 1,000 courses a year, all our 1,000 courses were offered face-to-face in small room environment, and that worked for many, many years. And then all of a sudden COVID hit, and it was a matter of surviving or not. And so we pivoted to full online. Now all our courses are offered online, and we're discovering that people actually prefer that to face-to-face for a couple of reasons. It's less time-consuming, and a lot of the some of the barriers to professional development is not always about the money; it's the time commitment. No one has 2-3 days off a week now to come up to the university and have their training done there. This will always continue. As soon as we can deconfine, we will continue. We will put back courses in the classrooms. But in parallel to that, we will always have the online versions now, because we just surveyed, I think it's a little over 600 of our participants lately. And something like 92% said this was a wonderful experience. I much prefer this format than the face-to-face format. So going forward, yeah, we'll probably going hybrid, where some of the courses will be online, or all of the courses will be online. Some will also be face-to-face, or a combination of both. It could be that you have in a room here in Ottawa a group of people who, and that course is also being broadcasted across the country. In fact, across the world, we've had a few already that are broadcasted globally. So the reach, the expansion is huge now. So a silver lining on this deadly pandemic, if I may say.
Yeah, which is always interesting. And Chris, can you comment on remote working within SAP? What's in your crystal ball? And I was going to ask the other people on the call or on the video as well.
Yeah.
Is it here to stay? And what's that model looking like?
It's funny. I sit on the executive team for Vancouver. We've got 1,200 people in our office downtown in Vancouver. And I used to travel about 3 days a week down to the US, down to Silicon Valley. That was my job, being in front of people. So when the pandemic hit, I thought, oh, this would be great. Everything will slow down a bit. I won't have to travel so much, spend some time with my family. And as it turns out, our volume just went right through the roof. Work longer hours now. Is what we found out generally is that we can be very successful still being distributed and working from home. Now, SAP, as a lot of companies, leaned into that. Twitter has basically said everybody can work from home now. That's their policy. A lot of companies are doing that. And now we're even starting to recognize what percentage of people are actually going to come back to work, or what percentage are going to work from home, or what does a hybrid look like? What we've learned is that, yes, we can be very successful working remotely, just as successful. That said, there is a lot to be said about the social capital that we create when we're working with people in a team. It's one of the things we all loved about the military, the esprit de corps, the working together. There's a lot of value that gets created from that, especially when it comes to creativity. So I think generally we can say that all large companies, if not all companies, are going to be leaning into it a bit where they can to allow people to work remotely. But there is really a desire. I talk to my team, and they really much want to get back in the office, see each other, and again create those creative opportunities together.
Scott, are you finding the same way, or because you handle things within the federal government, are people, forced to be on site, or how do you guys adapt?
I think federal government has learned many of the same lessons that Chris was just talking about. I'll give you my own personal experience. I've been a public servant for 13 years. I can count on one hand the number of days I teleworked in those 13 years until last March. And now I believe, and I think most of government believes, that is now the reality. And quite frankly, we've demystified this concept that you have to be in an office. Will we return to the office? Absolutely we will, but it'll be a very different scenario. I don't think it'll be 5 days a week. I have employees on my team in St. John's, Newfoundland and Victoria, British Columbia, and they lead security-related risk analysis teams that could be here in Ottawa or could be just as spread out as they are. So I think federal government has learned that we can do the job. In fact, I think we can do the job just as good or better in this virtual world. We've introduced new tools, new processes, but, as Chris said, I think you lose something there. There's a little bit of that esprit de corps. There's a little bit of that. I had someone describe it to me the other day as the meetings before the meetings and the meetings after the meetings. right? Where you grab that person or that individual that you needed to talk to and you have a little sidebar chat. That's difficult to replicate in the virtual world, right? But we're learning ways to overcome it. It's been a game changer in federal government. I don't think there's any going back to the way it was. And it accelerated our IT program. From a security professional inside of Shared Services Canada, the first 3 months of this pandemic was so busy as we were trying to accelerate all these programs around cloud and collaboration tools, and we wouldn't have done it without our partners in industry. I mean, there was so much happening in that April, May, June timeframe last year to enable, 400,000 government workers to work from home. It was awesome to see, and I think the world has changed, and we'll never go back to what we thought was normal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a new way. Anthony, talk about how the bank has been pivoted towards this. I mean, one thing I can tell you from like the Coding for Veterans perspective, now job opportunities are open to graduates from coast to coast. You don't have to be in the same city. So talk about Scotia's crystal ball coming out of this pandemic.
Yeah, good question, Jeff. Tough question for me to answer. I don't want to put my chief human resources officer in any kind of hot water here, but from what I've seen at my level, we've been honestly pretty successful. I can't believe it's been over a year now that I haven't stepped foot in the office. Not even to grab my belongings. I'm thinking about my plants that have definitely died. But all that to say, I've done it without any kind of hiccup. And I know that's definitely the resonates with my peers as well. And I think across HR and across the business, I think we've been, if anything, more productive. So I think it shows not only, as the other panelists are saying, that we're able to get more work done, but at the bank level, I think the bank was quite fortunate to invested quite a lot of money into its IT and technology infrastructure before the pandemic. Kind of like a flashback to Coding for Veterans, also, brilliantly anticipating this. But we're fortunate, we had great tools like Microsoft Teams, so we're able to conference virtually. Now, as far as, from a hiring standpoint, what that looks like and how that'll shift the landscape and kind of shift perception as far as hiring people nationally and hiring people remotely, honestly, I don't know. I don't want to speak out of turn. I think we've kind of opened Pandora's box of as far as remote work and these hybrid models we're talking about. But will that shift things long term? I don't know. I hope so. I think some work is better done in person. But let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's hope that for some of these IT roles, these cyber roles, that things do shift.
Yeah, no, for sure. We've got a flurry of questions, and I want to get to them because we only have about 10 minutes left here. There's a question we had, what is the one misconception that, and I'm going to direct this to Scott, Chris, Anthony, because you guys, handle hiring here. What is the one misconception that you feel employers have related to hiring veterans, and why should they be hiring? You want to kick it off?
Sorry, I didn't hear you there, Jeff. You said at me?
Yeah, I said it to you.
Okay, sorry. You're cut out there for a second. The joys of virtual meetings and conferences, right? I started public service life 13 years ago, and I've been in several jobs where my peers, my bosses, didn't know much about military and veterans. They didn't know. And I would always take the time to try to educate them a little. I think one of the biggest misconceptions for folks who are not in the know, the folks haven't been around military folks or around veterans that have left the military. They have a perception, maybe a Hollywood perception, where they think very specialized. Everybody works in that warfighting game. Obviously, that's a mission of a military. But what few people really understand is that, take it to and leadership and communications. And I think it takes organizations like yours, organizations like we've stood up in Shared Services, a veterans network, to break down some of those misconceptions that, Yes, there may have, that veteran may have been a combat arms soldier, but that's not all he is or she is. That's not all the skills they bring, and the other skills that he or she brings can be applied to any type of job, especially in the public service.
Great answer. Chris, you want to chime in from SAP?
Yeah, I guess there's 2 time periods I look at. I've been a soldier for 36 years as a reservist. Pre-Afghanistan, I think there was a lot more misinformation about what a soldier is capable of, the training, and how that can transition. Post-Afghanistan, I think that's changed quite a bit. We talk about it a lot more, and I'm actually seeing better connections with people when they realize that you served in the military, or when we talk to other people who are veterans. I've had many times where that's been leveraged to great extents when you make connections with customers as well. Oh, you served, and so it really kind of depends. I think right now the biggest misconception is how value is transferred. And I know that we talked about it a little bit before, but the ability to multitask, the understanding of the constant learning, and the teamwork. The teamwork's a big piece of that. The other thing is that everybody who moves into civilian life, moves into their careers, that is former military, needs to literally kind of promote that a little bit. And this is a big shift for everybody as well, because you as a veteran or someone coming out of that service and going into the civilian life is actually a person who's advocating for other veterans. And this is one of the things that I've really tried to instill with my peers as well, is you're amazing at your job. People need to know that you've got some of these skills from the military, because you're helping buddy who's coming in after you. And you're basically, you're transitioning, a little bit of your success, and you're sharing it out, and it helps demystify a little bit of the resources and the capabilities and the understanding with our civilian partners as they come to understand what we're capable of.
Which is great. And Anthony, do you want to chime in from Scotia's perspective? Like, when you're hiring people, obviously you're in the reserves and what have you, and you get it. But what are most companies missing, and why aren't they hiring more?
Yeah, I'd first like to point out I really liked what Chris just said about kind of blazing a trail for any veteran, any service member who's transitioning. I definitely want to echo the fact that when you show up, especially early on in your transition, if you have less or no corporate or experience outside of the armed forces, people's perception of you won't just be cast on you. You're blazing a trail with everyone that you meet, good or bad, for the rest of the military community. So it's something that I'm very cognizant of whenever I interact with people, and they know, they find out that I serve. I'm very careful about, the bias, positive or negative, that may impart. Maybe if I could just go back to you and ask you to repose the question, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So what's the biggest misconception that employers have, that you feel that employers have, related to hiring veterans?
Yeah. I've seen a range of biases, good or bad, positive or negative, towards veterans. There's a lot of talk these days about conscious and unconscious bias and how that affects us, especially in the hiring space. I think one bias managers or people enter with is that we're very rigid. We need orders, we need very clear direction to succeed, to excel, and that we're used to barking orders out, right? And especially as a sergeant, as an NCO. There are a couple other NCOs on the panel. I think that's an outdated model, and I think not everyone aligns to that style of thinking. But I think we need to do whatever we can to help shift that perception that we're flexible, and that if anything, veterans, our greatest strength is adaptability, right? Because especially in combat arms, what do? We're often deployed to foreign countries to navigate ambiguous and sometimes hostile situations, right? And we do that very well.
Which is great, because the flexibility, that's sort of what's there. Serge, we have a question here directed to you. can you talk about the transferability of credits between, say, the Coding for Veterans program and the overall university, and are they transferable? And you know, how does that go?
Yep, the answer is basically yes. I mean, we're working out literally the last minute details of that. So I'm not talking hours here, but talking few weeks. We should have that all figured out. So yes, faculties, in this case, for example, Faculty of Engineering, the School of Computer Sciences, would recognize courses taken through PDI. So whether that's Coding for Veterans courses, other cybersecurity skills courses that we offer, they will recognize those courses as credit equivalents. Okay, so it's very important for people to understand that if they come to these courses, they don't have to go for the credit. But if that's not that is an objective for them, yes, and you will get an official University of Ottawa transcript saying that you've completed, you know, so many PDI or Coding for Veterans courses, which is an equivalent to so many credits. Should you go on then to the a fuller university degree, those credits are transferable. But just the fact that you have them in your pocket doesn't mean that that you have to go for a full, you know, master's degree or something like that. It is still an official University of Ottawa recognition that you did some university level training, which is recognized, officially recognized. And we will, by the way, grandfather in those people who are already in this program that will be grandfathered in. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, we got one last question here, and I was talking about second languages, and this one's going to be interesting because I think we may have diverse. University of Ottawa is the largest English in the world. So, Chris, can you talk about, is there value in having a second language in tech, in your thoughts? And then I want to hear from Scott, because with the government, it may be different.
Yeah, so that's a great question. If your second language is Java, then yeah, sure. Because here's the thing is, my company's worldwide, so in a given day, I'll have programmers in Poland and India and Vietnam that will be working with me on projects, and in Canada. So speaking English and being able to be articulated in English is obviously very valuable. But your languages, man, if you're going to focus on a language and you're looking at technology, focus on Java, focus on all the new emerging languages and technology, because those are the things that we look immediately when we're looking to hire. We look and see, can they actually program in these languages? That immediately gets you that first step in the door to getting a career in this space.
Which is great. And what about the federal government? Because I know they're handcuffed with different rules.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Canada is a bilingual country. We have bilingualism laws. Federal government tries to promote that as much as possible. I would say, your question is about second language in the tech industry. I would say, second language in federal government is universal, and that if you're a French speaker, having the ability to speak English, if you're an English speaker, having the ability to speak French is paramount. And it's challenging in the tech world, in particular in my slice of it, which is that cybersecurity piece, to find the right qualifications at the technical level and marry that up with folks who are competent in both official languages. But there are ways to do it. The good news is, I would say, especially in, since I joined Shared Services Canada, one of the things I did recognize, and it's true today, there is quite a commitment to training. There's quite a bit of training dollars put into the system to bring people's second language skills up. At the entry level, we don't expect you to be bilingual. But if you reach into the management and executive realms, we do. It also varies across the country. From a federal government perspective, Canada is broken up into zones, some of which are bilingual zones and some of which are unilingual zones. So there are opportunities. If you only speak one of Canada's official languages, there are still opportunities. It's interesting that the whole COVID effect and the virtual work, the virtual telework we are doing, where I could have someone, in in 1,000 miles from Ottawa, managing a team across the country, and how is that going to play into the whole requirement to have to be proficient in a second language? That's starting to shake things up a little bit because BC, for example, is designated an English essential zone, so I don't need my managers out there to be bilingual. Ontario, Quebec, and the Atlantic provinces are bilingual zones. So it's certainly a piece of it. People coming out of the military know that French language training and French language introduction was part of their training as well. Keeping that up is certainly an asset. I tell all my interviewees, whether they be veterans with 30 years in or students right out of university, that if you're looking for a job in public service, learning that second language, or at least starting to learn it and therefore showing your willingness to go down that path, is always a good thing.
Awesome. Well, listen, guys, this has been a great panel. There's been some fabulous insight that we've had, and I just want to thank you not only for supporting our Coding for Veterans program, but taking time out of your busy schedules to appear and give some real nuggets of wisdom to our audience. So thanks for your participation today.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Thank you very much.
Right. Cheers. Thank you.
And so now we are just going to do a quick 3-4 minute break and on to our next panel.
Your mission is to find a meaningful career after your service. At Veterans Affairs Canada, our mission is to support you. The education and training benefit is part of that support. All veterans who have honorably released since 2006 and who served at least 6 years can apply for this benefit. The amount of money you receive will be based on your years of service. We have made this benefit flexible so you can choose what's best for you, the education that'll help you get the career you want, the school that best suits you. And after tuition is paid, you can choose how to spend any remaining money to best support your education that semester. Not sure what career or education path to follow? We can help. A career counselor with the new Career Transition Services program can help you develop a plan. We know a meaningful career is an important part of your well-being. This benefit can help you achieve both. To learn more about the education and training benefit and how it may help you, go to veterans.gc.ca. A message from the Government of Canada.
I wanted to work for Veterans Affairs Canada because of the specific clientele that Veterans Affairs have. I've met a lot of veterans and retired RCMPs with such health debilitating concerns. So then I wanted to do more for them. I wanted to become more of an advocate. And I think it's very important that we remain closely linked to these clients because they deserve to have this type of support. Really, it's going back to the basics of nursing and knowing the fundamental nursing principles, which are, knowing your ethics, the responsibility, fidelity, autonomy, integrity, doing good and to do no harm to your clients. If you keep to the basic, you'll make Florence Nightingale proud. You'll be like the modern nurse, I should say. But there's quite a bit of interesting situations that I've been at Veterans Affairs. But what was rewarding was we had a client. He was a retired military, served for over 30 years, and he received a disability award for his cancer of the lungs. So what has happened was the veteran wanted to remain at home because he's lived there for 30 years and he didn't want to go anywhere else. He wanted to spend the rest of his life at home. I was able to advocate for this client. We were able to provide all the necessary equipment for him at his home, like hospital beds, nursing care, occupational therapy was also recommended. Palliative consults were also recommended. Oxygen therapy and regular nursing visits. But yeah, up to this date, I I still remember that man, and he held my hand and said, "Thank you so much for doing this, because now I know I'm gonna leave." Sorry, I'm getting so emotional. That I can leave this knowing that Veterans Affairs had my back, because I've lost hope. But you coming here allowed me to realize that there's still hope out there, that all the service I did for my country is all worth it.
A message from the Government of Canada.
If you've served in the Canadian Armed Forces or RCMP, there are services for finances, career development, education, mental health, and PTSD to support you and your family.
Hi there, folks. Thank you for sticking with us while we made that quick switch over. And now it's my name is Pat Shaw, and I'm one of the co-founders of Coding for Veterans. It's my pleasure to introduce the final panel of the day today, and focus in on our topic about. So now that I'm out, how do I stay connected? Joining us is Julia Scouten, Brian Riddell, Stephen Clark, and Cliff Trollope. So, welcome, folks. Glad you could join us. Right. Now, I believe everyone is connected, and we're ready to kick it off. So, in light of the fact that so many folks have been with us for quite some time, I'm going to move right into the introductions. And Julia, let's start with you, and start out quickly introducing yourself, your role today, and give us a quick elevator pitch about the organization that you're representing here today.
Sure. Okay. So my name is Julia Scouten, and I'm a former serving member from the regular force. I was in for about 9 years, and I've been out for about 13 years. Reflecting back on my military career, the contribution that I'm most proud of is actually serving overseas on a deployment. I was in the Persian Gulf on the HMCS Toronto, and it was a chance for me to serve my country and just really to experience life. And I just learned so much from that tour. So when I released from the military, I actually went to work for the federal government, but I recently went through another major transition where I left the federal government, and I now work at KPMG as a senior manager in cybersecurity. I'm really passionate about supporting women in cybersecurity and defense. So I actually volunteer on the executive committee of Women in Defense and Security as co-VP of Public Sector Relations for D&D CAF. My role is to promote our events within D&D CAF and to really listen to their needs so that our events bring them value. We are an events-based organization where we aim to promote and support the advancement of women in careers related to Canadian defense and security. We are developing a community that works together to transform culture. Since joining the executive committee about a year ago, I've really come to see what this organization is really about, that works together to transform culture. It's also interesting time because, of course, it was during COVID and we couldn't meet in person. So being an events-based organization, we had to really pivot hard to an online platform, but the results have been amazing. we are now able to reach a wider audience across Canada. So for example, we just had our annual scholarship breakfast, and normally that would be attended by about 500 people at the Shaw Centre. As we're this year, because of the online platform, we were able to reach over 800 people from all across Canada, and we had speakers from all over the world. It was really quite amazing.
And you guys did an incredible job of using a digital platform to connect people, speakers and presenters from around the globe. That was pretty cool. So
it was
good
amazing.
On you. Good on you. Hey, Stephen, let me bounce over to you, and as part of the segue to your introduction, I wanted to mention that Coding for Veterans did a road show, we called it, last October, where we could only go around in Ontario, COVID compliant and distance meeting, all that. And I was at the Legion in North Bay, and we wrapped up and it was pouring rain, and this lady came knocking on the window of the van, and I handed her out my umbrella, and we all had masks on, and she was explaining to me some of the cool things that they did at that Legion to help veterans in their transition. So that's my segue to you, man.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for that, Pat. Yeah, you really speak to the heart of what the Legion is all about, that we're there to help people and to help veterans as they transition. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself, National Executive Director of the Royal Canadian Legion. I've maintained a connection to the military for decades. It started off being a dependent with when my father served in the RCAF, to my own service in the Air Force as a CIC officer. Class C serviced at Marcom and Class B at NDHQ. For the past 16 years, I continued that service in serving veterans through my work at the national headquarters for the Royal Canadian Legion. And been fortunate to have done a lot of different activities there, all with a veterans focus, in addition to service to veterans, but also in the remembrance side of things, where I served 10 years as a director of Canada's National Remembrance Day ceremony. And as Canada's largest veterans and service support organization with 1,380 branches across the country, all of our 250,000 members really know and understand what it means to be part of a group that cares deeply for veterans. We recognize that transition is a challenge for some people, and we have geared programs and developed our network of service officers right across the country to stand ready to assist whenever the need is there. So we recognize that transition to civilian life is unique to each individual. It can depend on a person's lengths of service or their family situation, their employment needs, whether they were medically released. All of these play a factor when somebody does their transition. And our branches are there to offer support, offer camaraderie. We have programs that we can assist you with, get you connected with, so that we can make that transition as easy as possible for you.
Cool. I appreciate that. And then over to Brian. Brian, could you do your little introduction similarly?
Happy to. Thanks for having me. Everybody can hear me all right?
Absolutely.
Thumbs up all around. Great. Awesome. So yeah, I'm Brian Riddell. I am the Chief Executive Officer at Team Rubicon Canada. I've been in that role for just over 2.5 years. Before that, I served 11 years in the Canadian Armed Forces, 7 of which were with the Canadian Special Operations Forces Command. I would say when I look back on my 11 years, I think the thing that I was most fond of was any opportunity I had to be able to align my personal goals with the needs of the institution and the military. And for me, I think without compare, was the opportunity to be able to command troops on operational deployments, served in Afghanistan and subsequently in Iraq. And I would say that was certainly the highlight of my experience. For me, Team Rubicon was an opportunity to take on a new risk, different challenge in the nonprofit charity sector. Team Rubicon serves communities by mobilizing veterans to continue their service. We leverage their skills and experience to help people prepare, respond, or recover from disasters and humanitarian crises. What does that mean? It means that we complement the work of government and non-government organizations to serve disaster victims on their worst days. We are building distributed communities of disaster response teams across Canada. Started out in 2017, and we're growing quite rapidly as I speak. The COVID pandemic certainly forced us to reimagine how we were going to serve communities throughout the country, and so we pivoted, and a lot of our work over the past year and a half has been centered on or focused on COVID-19 and the pandemic recovery. The big piece, I think, for on the veteran side of this organization that is pertinent to your viewers is that the growth and the idea for Team Rubicon was really based on this reality that veterans are uniquely suited to disaster response, and it's okay for us to ask of each other to continue our service in an EU uniform when we leave the military. And one of the great things that we found, and I've experienced myself, is that it's a great opportunity for us to experience a renewed sense of community, identity, and purpose that we are so attached to in our time, during our time in the military. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Well, thanks for being here. And I just want to put this one on the bulletin board here because I want to cycle back to you in a bit around, so how do you reach out to people, or how do they reach into you to be that volunteer? But first, Cliff. Cliff and I have connected a couple of times now, and he's got a pretty interesting story as his own transition story, but also is especially important guest given his connection to Treble Victor, who is co-sponsoring this event that people are attending today. So Cliff, over to you with the same kind of question set, please.
Thanks, Pat, and thanks everyone for having me. And it looks like a great event. Just a little bit about me, where I am now, how I got here, but really the important part of that is transitioning how that is to the group that I'm representing today that is not my day job. I served for 23 years in the infantry. I retired in 2007, November of 2007. And for this audience, I'll put it out there because it links to our group and what we're talking about. I started preparing for my transition in 2003. It was long. The challenge that I had at that time was there were no supports like there are now to help us through. I did transition in 2007. I'll come back to that being one of the hardest things I ever did. And when it was without the assistance, I was like looking for something in the dark without a flashlight. It was a long and agonizing because there was not the supports around. And then I'm going to speak now. I'm in my role as the national president of the Treble Victor Group. In my day job, I'm a senior partner at a large accounting and consulting firm. I run a risk management consulting practice for Eastern Canada for our firm MNP. So I really do two things. I do my consulting services in emergency preparedness and crisis management when I'm engaging with clients. But the other part of my job is I run the practice for Eastern Canada, and I'm responsible for running the business and making revenue for the firm and hiring and all of those leadership things that go with that. The group I'm representing today, so that my day job is all-consuming running a consulting business inside a big firm. I did not get to that role overnight. It's been a long climb since I did retire. The group I'm representing today is the Treble Victor Group. And what we are, I was one of the founding members in 2007. I was still serving when I joined. What we are is when we talk about connecting after service, we're a business networking group. We're a networking group of veterans that stay connected. Our mission, we have over 400 members now with chapters in Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, Fredericton, and we're about to open a chapter in Halifax. All volunteers. Anyone who's currently serving or a veteran from any military, any time in the world of their service can join. And really our mission is veterans helping veterans by staying connected, and is being connected for a specific purpose, and that is to help us reach our full potential in our post-service careers. And we do that through a number of different ways. It's a network, it's a group, it's a tribe. So there's one-to-one mentoring, there's coaching for transition. It's not just for transition, it's for post-transition when you're growing your career. And so mentoring, events, profile, coaching with each other, just helping each other. And in addition to that, our outward facing is to help inform corporate Canada the value of military service. So pre-COVID, our bread and butter was events, dinners, gatherings, get together with people. We moved that virtually like everyone else did. But that's what we are. When we talk about connecting after service, we are a group that keeps people connected after service. What the ultimate aim is, let's make sure we all do well through transition and reach our full potential when we're into our second careers. Our membership covers pretty much every profession, job, trade that you can think of in Canada. And I think I'll stop there because that should lead us in.
Yeah, actually, Cliff, it's a great segue to the next question I'm going to jump ahead to, given I just got a scan at the time. Could you, while you have the mic, could you share how is it that you reach out to those folks? How do you connect with them? Or how would you be telling the viewers online, how do they connect with you if they want to find out more? And that's pretty much the same question. I'm going to go around the room, please.
So for this audience, you can reach out directly to me, but we have a good website, www.treblevictor.org, that has a membership sign up. And you have to become a member. There's a small membership dues to keep us going. And the ticket for entry is you put you apply, and the only ticket is you must be sponsored by an existing member. And if you don't know one, someone will talk to you, just so that people understand what we're about before you're in. And it's a bit of a vetting process, but it's open to anyone of any rank that served in any military at any time in their life. And what is our foundation is the common bond of service. And that's how you reach out. Come to us. We'll connect you to an existing member so you can learn more, and then you're in.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Julia, back over to you with the same sort of perspective. Is how are you reaching out, besides running some pretty awesome events, and how would people connect if they're not familiar with WIDS?
Sure. There's several ways that you can connect with WIDS and stay current with our events. The first one is go to our website, wids.ca, and sign up to be a member. It's free, and that's so that you get our newsletters and stay current with everything.
Super simple, just wids.ca.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Also, connect with us on LinkedIn or like us on Facebook. And we have a great event coming up. It's actually speed mentoring. This is hands down my favorite event. Tickets are available online. It's only $25, but it connects you with, I think, about 2 to 3 mentors within public and private sector. And you get a chance to ask them anything you want and connect with them and get some great advice. So I highly, highly recommend buying tickets for that. It's on April 27th. And they're available online. And we have events throughout the year, whether it's creating connections, talking about mental health, our annual scholarship breakfast. We just have so many things going on.
That's awesome. Thanks for that. And Stephen, maybe I'll lead that over to you. I mean, legions are everywhere, it seems. It's not hard to find you guys. I know you've had some challenges, especially the Poppy campaign this last year. But what are you doing to reach out, and how would new people find you?
Thanks, Pat. There's a couple of ways. As you mentioned, we're fortunate that we have such a large footprint across the country. So in virtually almost any community or nearby, there is a Legion branch. So if a member has any questions, they want to connect to the Legion, they simply go there. And if you're looking for specific information, I'd really encourage the individual to reach out to the branch service officer. We have 1,400 branch service officers across the country, 27 trained professional service officers that can help with that transition. If you're looking for general information, legion.ca or any of our social media channels can certainly help with that. We want to create a welcoming environment for our military community. So something that we have offered, starting a few years ago, we've developed a Veterans Welcome Program where every current and former member of the military receives a free one-year membership into the organization. We want you to come, be a part of us, see what the Legion has to offer. Hopefully we have something that you're looking for and we can maintain a lifelong connection. But legion.ca or your local Legion branch.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. And Brian, particularly interested to hear how you reach out to folks who maybe want to travel halfway around the world to help out in a crisis.
Certainly. Well, I can tell you that, you know, if you were asking me that question 2.5 years ago when I was the first hire at Team Rubicon, I would have said, well, it's likely straight to me. But we do have a very large network, a very rapidly growing network of volunteer leaders throughout the country who are establishing local leadership teams. We also develop, we've also got a national incident management team that we're building as well. So there's lots of ways to get involved. We are quite active across the digital channels. So following us on any of the social media channels, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and contacting us. And the best way to really immerse yourself in Team Rubicon is to go to the website and join. Anyone can join. You know, we say Team Rubicon is open to everyone, veterans, first responders, civilians alike. But you know, it's tough work. The work that we do, the volunteer work that we're doing downrange in disaster zones is tough. But it's a great opportunity. People can join. They can get onto our online platform, which I don't mind saying I'd argue is one of the most robust volunteer management systems in the world today, where people can engage in online training, can connect virtually with other volunteer leaders, gain additional training, and sign up for events. Our calendar of events for whether it's training, projects, membership engagements, or short notice operations, all will show up. People will get an email in their inbox when they're members, when they're volunteers, and people will have an opportunity to get downrange and earn what we aspire to, which is the coveted gray shirt. And we have a saying in Team Rubicon, which is "earn your shirt." And so to earn the gray shirt, you have to come out on an operation, and that's probably the best way for people to immerse themselves is to sign up, join, do the background check, and join us on an operation.
Cool. My goodness, it's already 3:30. Let's do, if the people joining in can hang on for a couple more minutes, let's do one quick around the room in terms of one last bit of advice, if not your organization, because I think you've all represented well. Is there another, like what is the additional thing that you would think of that you would encourage people to do? Julia, let's start with you.
Okay, so my one piece of advice is take advantage of every opportunity available to you. For example, when I was in the military, I used up like all of my professional development budget all the time. I took French courses. That's where I got all my certifications in cybersecurity. I remember studying all the time. And then once I released, I actually applied for the Educational Training and Benefits program for Veterans Affairs, and I'm about to complete my MBA because of that program. So I'm constantly looking for opportunities and taking advantage and really seizing them. So that's my advice. There's so many great resources out there, and just use them.
Cool. Thanks much. Stephen, over to you.
Absolutely. I have to echo that. Veterans Affairs, absolutely tremendous in helping veterans transition to civilian life. Variety of programs that really help with all of that. The biggest thing that I can say is if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask, because there isn't any question that is not important, because if you're asking it, you need to know the answer. So absolutely ask whatever comes your way, and Legions are always there to help provide responses if we can.
Awesome, thank you. Brian, and then I'm going to give Cliff the kind of co-sponsor wrap-up opportunity.
That's totally fitting. Yeah, absolutely. No, my piece of advice, I thought a little bit about this, and mine's maybe a bit from the heart here. But when I've talked to a lot of folks that have been transitioning since I left, a lot of my friends are still in the military. One of the things I impart to them is, even if you don't know what industry you want to go into, even if you haven't had the luxury of time to be able to plan your transition, and suddenly you just find yourself in the middle of one, my advice to those I speak to is look for a vision and a culture and a mission that you believe in. And if you believe in that mission, then it's something you're gonna be able to find work toward that vision that is going to give you passion in what you decide to do. And I say that, I think, more so because of my time in Team Rubicon. I've learned, and been inspired by so many volunteers that have come to this organization. They believe in our culture and in our vision for this organization. And that's something people can get behind. We're all, as soldiers, we're all very self-motivated individuals, and some of us, we transition, and we're going to need, it's okay to be a bit selfish early on and get your footing. Sometimes that selfishness is going to be focusing on your family. Sometimes it's going to be focusing on establishing yourself professionally. And sometimes, and what we've seen, it's folks that transition out of the uniform, and 2 days later they're on a Team Rubicon operation, because their way of finding themselves is through the service of others. So there's lots of ways to do it.
Great, appreciate those remarks. And Cliff, back to you. Last word on what in addition to Treble Victor would you suggest people should be looking at?
So it's almost like all of us had prepared this before, because I echo what the others have said. If you can, that have been learned. So the capper to that is, don't try to do it on your own. Reach out, like others had said. Find where you need, and reach out to everything. And that's what our network does. When you join Treble Victor, you don't just tap into the network of the people. It's people who are members. It's all of our networks. And some people have been out for a long time and have very well established networks. And our rules of engagement are, if you're a member and you reach out to another member, they have like 48 hours to help you. We're founded on the fact, and it was built on, in the military, when you said you're going to do something for someone, you did it. So when another member reaches out and say, can you give me some advice on this? Do you know anyone who works here? I'm interested in this industry. I'm trying to grow my career, and I'm here. That's what we do. So the message is, don't do it alone. You got all the groups represented here, plus a hockey sock full of other ones, and use all of those things. And sometimes it's hard in the military. We get stomped into some sort of sign of weakness of asking for help or assistance. We can't have that when we're transitioning. The gloves are off. It's scary, but not as scary as you might think it is. Expect it to be hard, but it won't be as hard as you think it will. And expect to succeed, because you will.
Awesome. I appreciate that from all of you. Thank you very much. It's a bit of a, if I try and sum it up, it's, someone will always have your back. It may not be the person standing beside you today, but someone in this network, in your networks, in the connections through VAC, through the people who participated here today, someone will have your back. So do reach out, stay connected, and stay driven, because that's the other thing I'm hearing from each of you and from the people who spoke earlier. You all have a renewed sense of purpose, an important sense of purpose, and I want to add to the people who have thanked you for your service. Because as I actually, before March 13th last year, I'd been to 30 different scan sessions. That was kind of how Coding for Veterans was trying to get the word out about this program partnered with the University of Ottawa. But that idea of staying connected, having that support, and the opportunities are there. But we are in a world where lifelong learning is an important new commitment for some, or a continuation for others. So find comfort and support in that. And Coding for Veterans is delighted to be able to be part of that journey for so many people as they move forward. We have wonderful instructors, over 15 instructors now. And someone earlier was talking about what language are you going to learn? Do you really need to learn Canada's official languages? And we've never discouraged someone from pursuing both of those languages. But now we teach 4 other coding languages and all kinds of router switches, cybersecurity, ethical hacking, and lead people to that CISSP or CCNA certification to really embrace their own future and their continued learning. Again, thank you to you all, and thank you to everyone who's been part of this. Thanks to Jeff for really putting the timber together to make it all come together. And wish you all the best for the rest of your day. I think I saw on my phone that it's 22 degrees here, just in central Ontario. So all the best to you. Thank you.